And we're live.
Live streaming. Okay, very good. How many folks do we have in the waiting room?
I have to find my waiting room. Hang on.
Okay.
Looks like we have, we have 74 in the waiting room.
Okay.
Shall I let everybody in?
Yeah, no, yes, this is a public meeting. And
Ready?
we have capacity. Go ahead. Once everyone's in, we will call the meeting to order. Very good.
Force mute everyone. Mayor,
Yeah,
force mute everyone.
Well, I don't have the controls. Kelly, if you're able to mute folks.
Yep, I will. Yeah.
And also, if we're here to observe, if you would be so kind to mute when you are
I'm
not.
going to mute everybody now, and then I will come back and unmute everybody.
Okay, very good.
I'm in.
Okay, then I'm going to unmute. Oh.
These are the board.
They muted us.
Kelly, if you're ready, let me know when
I'm ready. Okay, I think all the board members can unmute themselves.
I think so. I just unmuted myself, so
Okay.
board members should do that.
I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Very good. I believe we are ready. So I will call this March 4, 2021 meeting of the University Heights City Planning Commission to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan.
Here.
Mrs. Urban.
Here.
Mr. Szymborski.
Here.
Mr. Fine.
Here.
Mr. Rock.
Here.
Okay, I know that all members are present. We have next item on the agenda, the approval of minutes. We have a set of minutes from January 7, 2021. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Very good. Motion by Mr. Szymborski to approve the January 7, 2021 minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan.
Aye.
Mrs. Urban.
Yes.
Mr. Szymborski.
Yes.
Mr. Fine.
Yes.
Mr. Rock.
Yes.
As a point of order, as a point of order, these are actually the minutes from February 4, 2021, and at the top they say January 7, 2021.
Oh, okay. I will make that correction.
Yes, and we probably need to re-vote because we just approved minutes that basically were
With corrections, Mayor.
I'm sorry?
Approve with corrections.
With corrections, and let the record reflect that these are actually the minutes from February 4, 2021. As we were doing this, I was thinking, I know we met more recently. Okay, very good. All right, well then we will get to the heart of this agenda, which is item 4A, recommendation to City Council regarding a special use permit application by Mr. Daniel Grand to use 2343 Miramar Boulevard as a planned operation of shul, place of religious assembly. Before I recognize Mr. Grand, the applicant, to present Mr. McConville, is there anything that you want to go over with respect to this evening's proceedings?
Yes, Mayor. Let me touch on a few housekeeping measures, both for the benefit of our audience and as a reminder to Planning Commission members. Planning Commission has before them a hearing for a special use permit under Chapter 1274 of the city's zoning code relating to the use of the property and improvements at 2343 Miramar Boulevard as a shul or house of worship. Because the Planning Commission's role this evening is to decide upon a matter of property use under the city's zoning code, this hearing.
Luke, you have been muted for some reason. I need you to unmute. There you go.
Okay, let me back up.
All right.
Because the Planning Commission is considering a measure of the use of property under the city's zoning code, the hearing will be conducted as a quasi-judicial hearing under Chapter 2506 of the Ohio Revised Code. That means, among other things, that we will be swearing in under oath any person who wishes to speak or testify at this evening's hearing. And it also means that we are obligated to provide the opportunity of cross-examination by the applicant with respect to any person who wishes to speak in opposition to the application. That is a matter of Ohio law. I think it would be helpful to go over the order of our proceedings tonight, just so that everyone has a feel for what we're going to be doing and the order in which we're going to be doing it. The first thing we will do is provide the floor to the applicant, who will be sworn in and make a presentation as to his application. The applicant is permitted to call witnesses and present any other evidence, documentary, testimonial, or otherwise relevant to the application. Next, we will ask for the participation of any person who wishes to speak in favor of the applicant's application. Once all those in favor have spoken, we will ask any persons who wish to speak in opposition to the application. Anyone speaking, as I mentioned before, anyone speaking in opposition to the application may be the subject of cross-examination. That is left to the discretion of the applicant. After those in opposition have spoken, the Planning Commission will have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. And once they have exhausted any questions they may have for the applicant, the floor will be closed. Planning Commission members can conduct any deliberations they deem appropriate, and they will take action this evening by motion and pursuant to roll call vote. The city is aware that this is a matter of great interest among the public. This is not the ideal format for conducting a quasi-judicial hearing. We're going to ask everyone to be patient. The Planning Commission members will stay here as long as it takes. If we were in person, they would be kicking me under the table, but they will stay here as long as it takes to hear everyone. Everyone will have the opportunity to speak, and at the end of the evening, they will make a vote. We would ask that you remain muted until you're recognized. And we would also ask that everyone on tonight's call adhere to a standard of decorum that is in keeping with the dignity of our city. For purposes of orienting the applicant, those opposed, as well as our Planning Commission members, I'm going to walk through the legal standard that's going to be considered this evening. As I mentioned before, Chapter 1274.01 establishes special uses within the U1 single-family home district, including houses of worship or religious education, churches, temples, synagogues, religious organizations, parish houses, and parochial schools. Sections 1274.02E and F are applicable as the legal standard for this evening's hearing. 1274.02E1 states, subject to all other provisions of this chapter, special use permits may be permitted only on land fronting on the following streets: Cedar Road, Warrensville Center Road, South Taylor Road, Fairmount Boulevard, North Park Boulevard, and Green Road. 1274.02E2, A special use permit may be issued by the Planning Commission for land fronting on other streets where the applicant demonstrates by clear and convincing evidence that the use will benefit and not impair surrounding property values or uses, vehicular parking and pedestrian congestion or traffic conditions, noise pollution, and will not be otherwise contrary to the public health, safety, or welfare, subject to the approval of a majority of council. 1274.02F provides prohibitions, and those are as follows. Number one, no building may be used for the uses defined in this chapter unless originally designed and approved for such use. Number two, the conversion of a residence, store, or other building for a use defined in section 1274.01 is prohibited. Number three, all uses defined in section 1274.01 must have frontage on one of the streets referred to in Division E hereof. Number four, no use permitted herein shall include sleeping or residential use accommodations on any part of the site. Number five, no variance from any of the requirements of prohibitions under Chapter 1274 may be granted without the approval of the Planning Commission and the approval of council, each following public hearings at which the applicant demonstrates a clear benefit to the community and that denial will result in an unnecessary hardship to the applicant. And I note for benefit of the Planning Commission that variances would have to be provided to items 1 through 4 that I just read through, along with variances relating to lot size, lot frontage, front, side, and rear yard setbacks. The clear and convincing evidence standard that is enunciated is defined as follows. Clear and convincing evidence is that measure or degree of proof which will produce in the mind of the trier of facts a firm belief or conviction as to the zoning criteria sought to be established. And lastly, I want to note that the city is in receipt of a variety of written materials that have come to the city in the form of petitions and letters, both from residents of the city in favor of and opposed to the proposed applications. Those materials have been provided to Planning Commission members in advance of the hearing. And those items will be included as part of tonight's record. As with any trier of fact, the Planning Commission members are asked to exercise their judgment in determining the relative degree of weight to apply to any particular piece of evidence, document, or testimony. I'm happy to answer questions about the legal standard as Planning Commission members begin their deliberations. And with that, Mayor, I would turn the floor back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. I know you touched on this somewhat, and I also want to make sure that it's repeated, perhaps for emphasis. There are lots of things that I know people have had to say, especially with regard to things that they have filed and submitted to the city. I would ask that people keep their comments germane to the application that is pending before this body this evening, and that we take testimony and hear evidence and commentary only on those matters that are directly relevant to these proceedings. There are a lot of people here. I anticipate a lot of people are going to want to talk. I am in the position of being both, the mayor, the chair of this planning commission, and ultimately the one holding the gavel to call people to order. If you are talking about things that are beside the point or are more properly relevant before some other body with regard to some other complaint or issue you may have. So I will at first, cautiously remind you to keep your comments germane if they are not. And ultimately, we will move on to somebody else who may have something that they want to say that is relevant directly to the special use permit application on the agenda this evening. So with that, if there are no questions, I would wish to recognize the applicant, Mr. Daniel Grand, who is on the call, the Zoom meeting, to present on behalf of his application. Mr. Grand, you have the floor. Mr. Grand, you seem to be muted. You don't appear to be muted, but we can't hear you. I cannot hear Mr. Grand. Can anybody else hear Mr. Grand? Okay. Mr. Grand, perhaps you could see if your microphone is turned on your own machine.
He's muted.
I know yes, he appears to be muted. I mean, from our point of view, he has turned off his muting, but we still can't hear him. Okay, I think he's going to dial in separately in order to be heard. So we will bear with him and sit tight here while he logs in again. And we'll watch for him in the waiting room so that we may admit him. Okay, I see Mr. Grand is in the waiting room. Let's bring him in. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Okay, Mr. Grand, are you here?
Mayor,
Yes.
I see Mr. Grand, and I see him trying to talk, but he's still, and he's not muted on the system, but whatever he's using to communicate with still doesn't work.
Right, I agree. I cannot hear Mr. Grand. It looks like he's going to dial in. There is a phone option. The same meeting ID and passcode apply if he dials any of the phone numbers that are on the agenda. So we will wait for him to dial in separately. Thank you. I think that may be Mr. Grant's phone number there, 718 area code. Okay, Mr. Grant, we did just admit your phone number in.
Let me know if you can hear me.
Oh, I think we can hear you.
Okay. So I got to lower this here. Okay. So thank you and everybody. I apologize for the audio glitch there. I want to thank you all for participating and being here.
Can hear you now. Very good.
Can you hear me? And you can hear me good? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I did want to say that I do have representation here. Mr. Rosenfeld is on this call as well, and I think that he should be the person that takes my leading hand here, and he will guide me with the consent of this body. So, Mr. Rosenfeld, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Before we proceed, Mr. McConville, I think the witness needs to either swear or affirm. And Mr. Rosenfeld, I don't know that he has to. I need your guidance here.
We will ask anyone who's speaking tonight to swear or affirm.
Mm-hmm.
I can affirm.
Okay,
Well,
well,
like me to affirm too.
I'll ask you to raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I affirm.
Thank you. All right, you may proceed, Mr. Grant.
Mr. Rosenfeld, I was requesting that he speak on my behalf. He's my counsel attorney.
I see Ethan Rosenfeld on the list here. Mr. Rosenfeld, you may unmute yourself and proceed. You can state your full name.
Ethan, and Mr. Rosenfeld, I don't hear you either. For some reason, there's no audio. No, I can read lips though. Do you want to call in also, Mr. Rosenfeld? And leave your video on like I did? maybe there's a master mute, and even though we're unmuting it, it's not really affecting anything. They're like a owner of the chat, maybe has like a master mute.
That's the problem.
Hello, Mayor Brennan?
Yeah, I hear Mr. Cooney, I think.
Hi, I just wanted to check. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Okay.
Testing. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So
Thank
it's not that, that's not the problem then.
Yeah,
Okay.
All right.
I just let up.
Very good.
Miss-
Mr. Rosenfeld,
Mr.
if you would
Rosenfeld.
call in, perhaps. I see his lips moving. I can't hear him.
I can.
I can put him in a waiting room and try to bring him back out, see if that helps.
Maybe I'll send him the call-in information. Your call in here.
Okay.
So I sent him the phone number, the meeting ID, and the passcode to gain access.
Okay.
Sorry for the technological disturbances.
Oh, we'll work through them.
Thank you.
Give me that phone back.
I'm not sure if Mr. Rosenfeld can hear me or not, but if so, maybe you call in on your cell phone with the information I sent to you. I texted you the call-in details.
I think Kelly just admitted someone that might have been Mr. Rosenfeld.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Rosenfeld.
Beautiful. Okay. Tested it beforehand 500 times. Anyway. Okay. So thank you for letting me to speak, Mr. McConville. Did you want to swear me in?
Yes. Do you affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Affirmed. So I'm here for Mr. Grant today, and thank you so much everyone for joining. I know there's been a lot of conversations, writings, understandings of what may or may not be happening at this property. And I'm really hopeful today that we can have some cordial, formal, gauged discussion about what actually is going on. So I'm going to speak for a bit, and then I'm going to basically do a direct examination of Mr. Grand. There might be some questions you guys may have. After that, I'd like to talk to Rabbi Roskam, the proposed rabbi for this proposed space. Okay. So in my mind, this hearing is about whether a resident of University Heights may host prayer services in a designated, modest space in the resident's house and in a manner that is respectful of and not intrusive upon the resident's neighbors. This should clear things up here. So to start, let's walk through Chapter 1274, the chapter referenced by Mr. McConville, specifically subsection 1D, which substantively is very analogously described by the section Mr. McConville referenced in his introduction. Let's apply it to Mr. Grand's proposed use. As the ordinance, unsurprisingly, it codifies much, if not all, of the concerns that I understand the neighbors have about his proposed use. But even before this, let's look at subsection 1B of Chapter 1274, which provides that a permit is needed to operate as a house of worship or a synagogue. This is a threshold item. If Mr. Grand's proposed use rises to the level of a synagogue, then the other provisions of this chapter are triggered to apply. We are here, we're not disputing that it applies. Nonetheless, I believe it's important that we have in mind that Mr. Grand wants to use a space in his house to host men's only prayer services for a prayer group once a week and on certain high holidays. This use, to me, I'm an observant Jew. To me, it doesn't bring to mind the usual imagery of a formal synagogue, like you may have in your mind of such a type as on Green Road. Those are the types of synagogues, of formal synagogues. They're public spaces with families of men, women, and children shuttling in and out throughout the day and night to pray, study, to socialize, where cars line the street or crowd a lot, where life events like weddings and bar mitzvahs, they not only can be held, but they're routinely held. What Mr. Grant hopes for is far from the image of these types of synagogues, these formal places of worship that you may have in your mind. In the Jewish community, it's called a Shabbos shul. And it connotes a nimble, a modest operation often held out of a residence, meant to provide an area with nearby communal prayer on days when driving is prohibited and relaxing or serious davening, praying, is encouraged by Jewish law. I liken it to if Mr. Grant were to throw some bases out into his backyard. Yeah, he has a field there. He might even call it Grand Field. He might play with his kids there. He might invite some guys over and play a game of baseball. Might go on for a few hours. He might have 20 people playing. But what he's established is not, I'm here in Cleveland right now, it's not Progressive Field down the block. It's a shul, just like that's a field, but it's not a formal endeavor to that level that you may have in your mind. Regardless, let's assume Mr. Grant's proposed use would constitute a synagogue or a house of worship, and return to the meat here, your concerns as codified by subsection 1D. This subsection, as Mr. McConville said, to safeguard the public health, welfare, and safety on Miramar and its surrounding neighborhood, enumerates an extensive list of concerns that Mr. Grant's proposed use cannot, I'll show you does not overstep. I will run through each at a high level, and I would like to engage in something like a direct examination of Mr. Grant to further bring the facts out here before we engage in hopefully a good neighborly discussion of what's going on and what everybody wants. So the first item on this list is surrounding property values, the effect the proposed use might have on it. I'm going to do a quick high-level thing here. There might be an effect on property values. It will not be a negative one. I think that's borne out by, at least in my experience, in areas that have anything to do with Jewish activity. I wish it was cheaper. It's just not. Surrounding property uses, the effect here, no effect on surrounding property uses. The space has already been built, and a prayer room is just that. The place for about 10, that's the minyan, that's the quorum needed for Jewish prayer in a group setting for about 10 people to pray. And then they're done, and they go home. They go back to their families. It's a very all these days are very family-oriented days. There won't be lingering around, especially because this is not really a family shul, a family synagogue, as I described before. Vehicular parking, Jewish Sabbath, high holidays, as you're probably aware, no driving is permitted. You might say theoretically, people can drive up until the holiday itself actually starts. Mr. Grant's made it clear to me, and I believe he has, or he will make it clear to everyone who comes by, that parking is not desired or allowed on his space. It is, after all, also the space of his residence. Pedestrian conditions, the effect here, there won't really be a noticeable effect. If there's any effect, it'll be a very, very slight effect if you happen to notice one guy or two walking around who you haven't seen before. The fact is most of the people everyone who would be coming to this prayer room lives within the vicinity and most likely already walks around this block on Miramar on the high holidays and on the Jewish Sabbath when we can't drive. We like to walk around and go on strolls. Traffic conditions, as I said, there's no driving. There'll be no cars brought to this endeavor. Lighting glare at night, that's a non-issue. I think that's enough said on that one. And the last one is noise pollution. There's no effect on this. This is, again, serious prayer, and then you go home to your family. In fact, even if we were into instruments and playing, and singing very loudly for these services, the room itself was actually soundproof during construction. It was designed as a music room. It wasn't even designed for this purpose to begin with. So with that high-level overview, I would like to bring Mr. Grant back in for me to have a direct examination of him, if I might.
Mr. Rosenfeld, can you hear me?
Okay, please proceed.
I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Grant, I think we all know here you've done construction on your house. We've seen it. What sort of construction have you done?
From the time I bought this house, I have expanded the footprint of the building by enlarging the master bedroom and the living room, family room on the north side of my home. And I have added a garage and utilized the previous garage space as arranged for residential purpose.
So am I right in understanding that on the left side of this construction, there you have 2 floors there, correct? There's 2 floors on the left side of your house facing the house from the street?
That is correct.
What's on the top floor?
It's one room. It's my master bedroom.
And what's underneath that in that new expansion?
It's one room. It's my great room, family room.
Okay, so where is this prayer room where the proposed uses would be held?
It's on the complete opposite side of the center part of the house. It's the side to the right, if you were looking at the front of the house, where you described a 2-story extension that's on the left. This is the right where the garage used to be. It has orange shades. It's 1 story.
What did you, I've already revealed it to an extent, but what was your initial plan for that room, that prayer room?
When I designed the space, it was sort of like a recreation room, sort of like a computer space, and sort of like a music room. And I was considering that an acoustic drum set can make some noise, having been a musician for the past 25 years, and electronic drums and electric guitar amplifiers can be late. You could disturb people late at night or whatever. So with that in mind, I had in this entire room, and the roof and the walls, interior walls and parameter walls, sound attenuation insulation put there. And for the record, I have played drums loud and live, even at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And to date, I don't believe the city's ever heard anybody say anything about it. I don't think it's been something that disturbed anyone. Out of
How long did
respect
construction
for the community. Sorry, Mr. Rosenfeld.
From start to finish, I know you're not completely finished, but from start to being materially finished, how long did construction take on this project?
Sincerely, longer than I would have ever dreamed or liked. We got brought into a situation with the contractor who, for all intents and purposes, perhaps was not as, is a bit unscrupulous, perhaps, and caused me some consequences, some damage, and left me in disarray and in shambles in certain parts of my home. And it's been a very rough and arduous and long endeavor to push through and complete our home. So it's been really hard, especially with the past few months and year or whatever. But we're working out the best we can.
So the room, the proposed prayer room, it's being used now. When were you first able to begin using it? And did you begin using it as that music room, like you first planned?
I did. I think the room was, for lack of a better term, completed somewhere in the June, July period of last year. And it was arranged with my drum set, and I actually went before the zoning board at one point, and I was sitting in that orange painted room. That was the room. It's still the room. It's orange.
How long did you continue to use that room as a music room? Up until when?
Throughout 2020, and maybe until the border of February, meaning the last week or so, around the last week or two of January, I moved my music equipment upstairs to the attic, and sort of I'm figuring out if I want to, put it out there and use it or what. I have to be conscious of certain things, so I haven't really had time to set it up yet. Just kind of being stored upstairs in one of my attic spaces.
So when did the plan to transition it into a prayer room, when did that really become cohesive in your mind?
I would say it wasn't really a plan. I think it kind of just certain things, I don't know, come together, or it becomes an idea that you have, and you shoot the breeze with some people and like, oh, that would be great. I don't know. So I would say somewhere in early to mid-January. That's when I started thinking about it. I'm an action taker. I think of something and I go and try to do it, and a day later I move quickly.
I can attest to that for the record. So what steps did you take to make the room suitable as a prayer room?
One more time? I didn't fully hear you. I'm sorry.
When you decided that you would go ahead and make this room into a prayer room, what steps did you take to do so, to make it a prayer room?
Well, it was really two parts. The first part was to move most of my music equipment. I had moved my electric amplifiers, all my guitars, half a dozen or so, my piano, my PA system, my microphones, all my seating, everything. I had like a little, not a conference table, but just for a small table that I had a couple of chairs around for discussing things with people, stuff like that. I had some more like lounge chairs, sort of like recreational seating and stuff like that. So I moved pretty much all that stuff out. I had a computer on a desk in there. But I had left my drum set there because the drum set's, a full drum set's a bit substantial and heavy, and I thought maybe I'd keep it there and still play. And even though I was considering maybe setting up the space to be used in a different way, maybe put some tables so I can sit and learn, study, and have maybe some people come over. It was sort of like a work in progress at that point.
Well, at some point you certainly did convert it into a space to be used as a prayer room.
Mm-hmm.
We can see now in photographs what's specifically there. We have chairs, there's tables.
Yes.
What else did you do to begin to prepare it as a prayer room? Did you, for instance?
Yeah,
I
think that transition. I think that transition occurred throughout the month of January. Like it went from sort of my doing this, an idea, and it getting a little bit of traction. And I made the acquaintance of Rabbi Roskam, who I had met through a friend of mine who, matter-of-factly, and again, I was shooting the breeze with some of my friends, and he was thinking it was a smart idea or a good idea, it could be useful, helpful for our community, the community, in other words. So upon meeting Rabbi Roskam, he had given me more direction, and I had some ideas, and then we kind of had a meeting of the minds, and then I decided that I would move my drum set out of there too. And then I went on to buy some chairs and some tables. So instead of having music equipment and loungy kind of chairs and things like that, I bought basically about 24 chairs and about 10 tables.
Right.
And I just arranged them in that room. I arranged them.
So the plan began to take shape, the space began to take shape. You were talking to rabbis, talking to Rabbi Roskam, you were talking to neighbors in the area who might want to come join you in a prayer group.
Yes.
By any chance, did you put up a sign? Did you put up a sign to indicate that you were going to begin hosting services?
I didn't put up any signs or anything external to my property to indicate that I would be having potentially having a prayer group in my house.
Did you start a website? I happen to know that you have experience designing websites. Did you start a website?
I didn't start any kind of website regarding the space. Zero. No, I'm not. This is my pure intention was never to broadcast this to really anybody. I, in confidence, perhaps incorrectly so, but in confidence, I had sent a very simple email message to about 8 to 10 people from the Jewish community that I thought might, be interested in something like this. And it appears that email, unbeknownst to me, got taken by one of the, the story I heard, how did it happen? Was that one of the wives took the email and thought she was doing a favor, and she copied it into a ladies group of Cleveland WhatsApp group or something like that. And then apparently it spread all over the place, and it became something well more than I had ever thought of or anticipated. I was not inviting this, no offense. I mean, like everybody in University Heights to my house. It really wasn't what my intention was, but somehow it got spread like all over the place. And I was sort of shocked, to be honest.
So you certainly didn't imagine that. What did you imagine for this space? In this best case scenario, what did you imagine the space manifesting itself as?
I think you said it, but I'll just say it too for the record as well. I live right now about a mile away. Most of the synagogues, Orthodox synagogues, are in Beechwood, and maybe one or two in University Heights that are a legitimate synagogue. And I was saying that, I didn't know the weather was, no offense, I mean, it's as bad as it gets. I mean, it's a little bit rough sometimes. It snows a lot. Sometimes it's raining a lot. I can't carry an umbrella on the Sabbath. I can't, prepare myself. I can't take my kids half the time, even though they're supposed to come or they should come or they want to learn about their culture and their faith and their history, and they can't. It's no one's fault, but at the same time, it is a mile 6 times over a 24-hour period because you got to walk back and forth through each of the 3 prayer services. So it's 6 miles worth of walking that I endure every Saturday and Friday routinely, which I've done really without, anybody caring or minding, nor should they. And in my opinion, it's my life. It's a private matter, and I don't request any sympathy or anything on that note. But at the same time, you get older, you have more kids now, and it is a family day, and it is excessive. It is excessive as a walk. It's a far walk. 6 miles is a lot, and the weather's conditions are bad. So I thought that it might be good to invite people to my home. I thank God I have some extra spacious home, and I thought it would be appropriate. And I don't know if a prayer group is really, comparable to a full-fledged synagogue, but when the city notified me that they wanted me to go through this process, I immediately abided because I do respect the laws here and I do respect the people here. And I respect everybody who's partaking in this and the community abroad. And all I want to do is something
so if I could just
proper.
If you don't, so Mr. Grant, if you don't mind, I just want to refocus on the question. And orient it from the space itself in terms of when you see the space, when you were ready to open yourself up to bring in a prayer group for prayer services, to be held at your prayer room, what did you imagine? Let's say it took off, what would the manifestation be? Just from the angle of the room itself, what would it manifest as? Would you?
Yeah.
We know, for instance.
I can say. For instance. Yes.
Allow me just to make sure that the question is clear. We know, for instance, a quorum for Jewish prayer in a group setting is 10. We know that your room has a finite amount of space and a finite number of chairs. So what did you imagine it functioning as on a day-to-day, weekly basis?
Well, weekdays and Sundays, the room would just be basically another room in my house. I don't always sit in my great room either. It's a formal lounge, like living room that when I have guests and, a friend of mine comes over, my wife has a girlfriend come over, they sit and talk in that room perhaps. But I'm not there maybe 3-4 nights out of the week in my own living room. That particular room, it's being named stuff that I don't really call it I call it my parlor room, just to be honest. I call that the parlor room in my colloquial personal life. But let's call it the prayer room. So that prayer room, I would still use it during the week for myself, but I have no need or interest or desire or intention to bring anybody over my house for prayer services or any other religious services or anything of that nature. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evening, and till Saturday evening is a 24-hour period, but the Jewish day starts at sundown and ends at sundown. Sabbath starts at sundown and ends at sundown. So it would really only be on Sabbath and high holidays when we can't drive. Only on the days we can't drive. So it's essentially one day a week, mostly throughout the year, and maybe 3 or 4 high holidays throughout the year, like, a Thanksgiving and then a Christmas and then an Easter. They pretty much parallel. The Easter parallels Passover, Christmas parallels Hanukkah. So the paralleling holiday seasons, more or less. Other than that, no weekday activity whatsoever.
Okay. So let's return to that email that you sent out when you were beginning to inaugurate hosting. In that email, you referred to the space as Shomea Tefillah. What does that mean in Hebrew? In English, actually.
God hears prayer. Shomea is the listener of, and Tefillah means prayer. So who is the listener of prayer? God. So it translates to God hears prayers.
Why give the space a name at all?
Well, I mean, in my mind, like a prayer group, there's so many different kinds, like, brownies for, the brownies, like the Cub Scout. I was a Cub Scout. I was a Boy Scout, right? So, you have all these different groups that have a name for their prayer group. And for me, I particularly thought that Shomea Tefillah had just a beautiful connotation. So that's what I called it, Shomea Tefillah.
You've never actually hosted prayer services in that space. Is that right?
I have not. I know I have not, ever.
Okay, so now I'd like to return to that list in chapter 12:7-4, that's particular subsection that I quickly ran through before, and give your take on the effects that you think your proposed use would have on these various enumerated items. Starting with surrounding property values. What effect do you think your proposed use would have on surrounding property values?
Well, I remind myself that I am under oath, so I'm going to be honest, and I will say that I think that the only effect of property values that it could possibly have would be positive, because if other people in the community knew that there was a Shabbos shul with a little bit of less walk, it would create more competition for some of the properties on our block, and that's what raises property values, essentially. I'm a real estate person, so I know. I can also say this, that the record for a purchase for a single-family home in a single lot was just achieved by my next-door neighbor, Carol Newman's house, over $350,000 on Miramar, right next to me, literally my next-door neighbor. So I would say that's fantastic for everybody, if you ask me, but I can't speak for other people. I don't know what their intentions are, but I think that it's great.
Surrounding property uses. What effect do you think your proposed use will have on your neighbors' uses of their own property?
I would say zero. I don't think, with all due respect, the color on the paint of my walls would affect anybody else's property or use, just like the people who stand inside of my house to drink a cup of coffee or to offer a prayer to God. I don't think that it would really make any difference what happens inside someone else's house.
Vehicular parking. What sort of an effect would you expect on this?
Absolutely zero. And the reason, again, is the need that we possess and that I have is essentially when we have to pray. Orthodox Jewish people pray 3 times a day and 4 times a day on Sabbath, 365 days a year. We have morning prayers every morning for an hour and a half, every morning before work, every single day, every Jewish man. And then an afternoon prayer, and then an evening prayer. And I don't need anything more than the local synagogues for those. But when it's a Sabbath and it's such a long walk, it would be nice as a convenience to be able to have an opportunity to pray closer to home, and in my case, in my home, but a lot closer to home for another dozen or so people, more or less. I think I may have missed part of the question, so maybe just remind me.
I think the question was vehicular parking.
So that's right. So it would have none. It would have no effect. We will not be bringing cars. You could bring a car to synagogue Erev Shabbos, meaning before Shabbos begins, like midday Friday afternoon. So you'll see a lot of Jews driving really fast to synagogue to park their cars there so they can kind of just have one less walking trip. But like I have stated to you in confidence, and I'll state it here before everybody under oath, I will make it excessively clear and known to all people who may decide to join me in my home that it would not be okay to park in front of my house or to park in my driveway or to park in front of any of my neighbors' houses. In fact, it will not be accepted by me to bring any cars at all because we don't really need them. And the people who are going to be participating in this prayer group, they will have to make do because at the same time, to the extent that they could drive to another synagogue and then walk back for 27 minutes, they can also not drive and they can walk 5 or 6 minutes. So I think they'll understand, and I understand completely. Now, just as a side note, as a person who lives on Miramar, I don't want people parking in my driveway. I have 2 cars, and that's it. And I don't let people park in my driveway. I don't let people use my driveway. People in general park in front of my house all the time. Those are my neighbors. I don't mind. I don't say anything. I don't really care. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't hurt me. Park in front of my house. Go ahead. Use the space. I think we can only park on one side of the street anyway on our block. So the fact that I have neighbors that live across from me, they need their friends sometimes to come over, and their friends and people park in front of my house, and that's just totally fine with me. It's totally fine. But I will not have any of the prayer group people parking on the block whatsoever, that I can say.
Okay, next item is pedestrian conditions. Describe the effect you imagine.
Well, I mean, we're not a marching band, practicing our trooping or whatever you will call it. It's really just the same people. I mean, you got to imagine every single Orthodox Jew that lives in University Heights is walking. So all these people are walking in University Heights anyway. So it's really, I don't know, it's sort of impossible to imagine that I'd be bringing people in like a Coliseum and thousands of people will be coming, to take over the streets for like this short period of time. Quite the contrary. I think it would be minuscule and nothing what you would say out of the ordinary. There are plenty of dog walkers. There are plenty of people who just go for brisk walks. There are joggers. There are school teams that run in unison. And it's great. And I don't think we have the quietest block in the world in that sense. I think that we have a beautiful block that everybody loves to be on and loves to traverse. And I don't think that, literally a handful of people is going to, make any difference in the world. And to your point earlier, Mr. Rosenfeld, you had stated accurately that a lot of these people are walking around anyway. They're walking here anyway. So these are people who live within 3, 4, 5 blocks of my house. So this is their block too, I mean, there's no outside people being drawn in like we're putting up a concert somewhere and then people are driving from all over the country to get there. This is nothing like that.
These items that are enumerated that begin to overlap. So the next item is traffic conditions. What effect do you imagine?
I don't imagine any effect. I can tell you again. No vehicles necessary. No vehicles will be brought, and I will enforce that with authority. If I have maybe one person who was not knowledgeable, they will learn extremely quickly. And at the same time, if one person in the world ever parked in front of somebody's house, I don't think that would constitute any sort of difficulty for the neighbors or anything like that. And it won't get out of hand. It's the opposite. There won't be anybody coming, and I'm making that extremely clear just to make it something that people can rest assured will not occur.
Oh. Okay. I can attest to the fact that if Mr. Grant says he's going to enforce something, he's going to enforce it. And when he enforces something, it's fully enforced. The next item is lighting glare at night. What effect do you imagine?
Well, I can't turn lights on or off, so I can't do that on the Sabbath, so I'm not going to be turning any lights on.
Okay. How about noise pollution? What effect do you imagine?
Well, I don't know about anyone else, but as far as I'm concerned, I've never heard anybody having a conversation inside their own house while I'm in my house. So I would find it hard to believe that anybody in their own house would be able to hear me talking at this level, or even if we're all talking. Jewish prayer is actually quiet. We don't use electric devices, so we can't use speakers, we can't use microphones, we can't make noise, we can't amplify, we can't make sound, we can't play music, we can't do many, 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 many things. There's a lot of restrictions in Orthodox Judaism. So there will be really no more noise than the sound of somebody talking. And actually, the main pinnacle of the prayers that we have as part of the liturgical composition is actually called a silent prayer. And it is. It's quiet. It's solemn. So there really is no sound in that sense.
So then at the end of this list, it enumerates a few, call them catch-alls, to make sure that nothing's slipping through the cracks. Public health, public safety, public welfare. Are you bringing, I'm going to just ask a series of yes or no questions. Just say yes or no. Will you be bringing any, or would you imagine your guests will be bringing any toxic substances or illegal substances to the premises?
I know that they will not. The answer is no.
Will there be any gang members arriving at your premises?
Certainly not. No.
Will anybody be bringing weapons to your facility premises except as permitted by applicable law?
Even that, no, because you can't carry on Sabbath. I can't carry an umbrella in the rain. I'm not allowed. You can't carry. It's an isser. It's a prohibition of religious law. So the answer could be no. Cannot be anything else.
Is there any sort of impact you can imagine that would be deleterious towards the public health, safety, and welfare from your proposed use?
Zero.
Even as a stretch, can you imagine anything?
No, I really can't. I mean, what could be different if I had 5 or 6 people come over for lunch? My dining room holds 14 people, so I have people come over for lunch all the time. On Sabbath particularly. I never had a neighbor say, Daniel, you have too many people coming over for lunch. I've never had anybody say anything to me because, to be honest, it's not really something that's bothering anyone. And this is the same thing. Instead of standing in my dining room, we'll be standing in my parlor room, a.k.a. prayer room.
So looking at this enumerated list, the way I view it, the way I sort of distill it, is it's sort of asking, are you going to be a nuisance to your neighbors? Is what you're trying to do, is it going to trespass upon, interfere with existing uses and reasonable uses of your neighbors?
Honestly, I certainly hope not. I mean, you really set me up there with a good question, which could have given a different answer, but I want to be cordial and polite and friendly and neighborly. So the answer is no, of course not. No, I don't want to disrespect anyone. I don't want to harm anyone. I don't want to disturb anyone's peace. I don't want to have any sort of negative associations with any of my neighbors. I've always tried, whatever issues have ever arisen between me and someone who brought something to my attention, to work it out to the best possible way that could be worked out. You can't always make everybody happy, but when it comes to this particular thing, I think I can. I think I can satisfy any objections that arise, because I don't believe having a handful of people come over the house is something that my neighbors wouldn't want to be able to do whenever they want to do it too. So of course they feel the same way about me. That's what I really believe in. I think that.
Thank you, Mr. Grand. That's the extent of my questions for Mr. Grand. I don't know how Mr. McConville and the town would like to proceed. I would like to ask just a few, much fewer questions of Rabbi Roskam, who would be presiding over services at the premises.
Well, yes, Mr. Rosenfeld, the thing that we would want to do is have you call any additional witnesses the applicant would care to call. So having Rabbi Roskam called next would certainly be in order if you are done with your presentation or direct examination of Mr. Grant.
I am, and I would like to call Rabbi
Mr.
Roskam.
Rosenfeld, might I just ask one thing? I do know that the city, Mr. McConville particularly mentioned that there were certain documentations. I don't know as far as formality goes. Should we address those after we speak with Rabbi Roskam? Would that be out of line to continue to demonstrate some of the documentation, I guess as a persuasive documentation at a later point in time?
Mr. Rosenfeld, if you'd like to be able to recall Mr. Grand to go over those documents after the rabbi, that would be fine.
Sure. For the flow, let's feed into Rabbi Roskam now.
Okay.
And we can bring back.
Thank you.
Very good. You may proceed.
Is he here? Is he
Mr.
on the call?
Rabbi Raskin, please unmute yourself. Are we going to be 3 for 3?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Mr. McConville, would you administer an oath, please?
Rabbi, do you affirm the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I affirm.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Rabbi Raskin, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you everybody for coming and participating in this conversation. I really appreciate everybody's inputs.
So I understand that you're relatively new to town. When did you move to town?
I moved to town the summer, so I guess it was in August of 2020.
Where are you coming from?
I just moved here from New York. I was living in Staten Island, New York, just before.
So you have smicha. That's an ordination as a rabbi. That's correct?
Yes. I have smicha from Rabbi Reuven Feinstein, Rabbi Moshe Heinemann. Those are two leading rabbis, and I have that smicha from them. Yes.
Why did you move to University Heights in particular, in a nutshell?
Well, I mean, I had just recently finished the rabbi training school. I guess you can say the Kol Hara that I was in. That was near Staten Island in New Jersey. COVID also set a bunch of things in my life crazy, which ended up I was an assistant rabbi in Staten Island at the time, and the COVID kind of stopped the shul functioning. It was time to move on. I have a sister that lives on University Parkway, so it's right near family. It was a nice place. It was time, it seemed like it was a nice option. It was a lot of nice people there. I actually grew up in the out-of-town areas in Denver. I spent a few years in Toledo, Ohio, and then in Detroit in school. So I like that of town. I like this area. So it was a nice option for me.
So you came to town around the summertime. About how long into this did Mr. Grant ask you to help lead services or host services for him at this prayer group on Miramar?
So it was a good few months later. It must have been maybe January-ish. I'm not sure exactly. It wasn't him actually that first brought it up. I have a neighbor across the street who was interested in, that was, I guess, talking to Mr. Grant about the project. And he had mentioned it to me first, and then he mentioned it to Mr. Grant, and Mr. Grant then called me and asked me to meet with him, and we'd spoken, and that's how it happened. Yeah. It must have been January time or something around, maybe it was late December. I don't remember exactly.
So you met, the idea began to take shape, Mr. Grant began to run with it, and you agreed, I suppose, to help lead services after all.
Yes.
What does leading services entail?
So basically, even though services are really all the same every week, in the bulk sense of it, it does have somebody that's there making sure that things go in the right direction, that it's just done in a serious way. It's not just becomes a social, event. At that time, while the same thing is true, the same prayers are done every week. There are differences. Just for an example, this past Shabbos, was Shushan Purim, which coincided with Shabbos, which was the first time since 2008 that happened. So, not necessarily a lot of people are prepared for any differences, especially coming into Shabbos straight from Purim, the holiday Purim. On Friday, there are some differences. There's some questions that come up. So always having a rabbi in hand is something that definitely makes it a lot easier. There are a lot of different, functions, special events, not events, but like holidays or minor holidays that happen throughout the year, and various questions. And besides for that, usually congregants like to make sure that it's done in a more, halachic way, that everything's done properly and in a more stable way, that they know that somebody's overseeing it.
When you first saw the room where the proposed use is situated, what was it being used as at that time?
So at the time, it was his house was under construction-ish. I guess you can see that some parts were still being done. There was some furniture that was in the room that was temporarily held there. I guess, and he had his in the front, the east end of the room, which is the front of the room. There was his guitar, what's it called, his drum set. He had some guitars, a piano there. He had a bunch of, I guess, computer things. He had a lot of stuff, like crates of stuff, boxes, whatever. It seemed to be like somewhat storage, somewhat his music room, and that's what it was at the time.
Did you have any hand in helping him, or did you guys do it jointly into redesigning the room to make it appropriate for the proposed use?
So we did speak a little bit. Just in regard to Jewish law, one of the things that come up is it's preferred, it's not required to have the ark with the Torah scrolls at the east end of the room with the direction you're facing. It doesn't have to be that way, but it is the preferred way. And so I was speaking to Mr. Grand to try to see if that was something that we could do. That was where his music was more situated, especially his drum set was over there. And at first he wasn't sure, did he want to move it? Did he not want to move it? In the end, he was very flexible, and he allowed, I wasn't pushing that it had to be done, but he was flexible, and he allowed it to be moved. And I actually even helped him with the piano, bringing it upstairs to his attic. So yeah, I was helping with that. We then spoke about, trying to figure out how to use the space. It wasn't a perfect dimensions for a synagogue. So we've tried figuring out how to use the best use of space for tables and chairs and to be able to put it out in a presentable way. So yeah, I would say I had a pretty big hand in the actual designing, I guess you can say, of it.
So what do you think of the prayer room setup itself, its spacing? Do you think and the way that it is now with the tables and the chairs, the numbers that are there, do you think it's suitable for day-to-day synagogue operations?
So, even as a Sabbath shul, the Shabbos shul, it's a little bit, you can make any room into a shul. People pray when they're out on the road. People pray wherever they need to. So we can always, it's pretty flexible. It's not like it has to be a very specific way. At the same time, when you discuss a shul and you discuss regular prayers, so just as a typical shul, you go to any shul, you see before prayers and after prayers, people have what they call chavrusa. They have some chavrusa learning, a one-on-one learning, or some people have a class before or after prayers. It's typically not something where everybody walks in at the same time and walks out at the same time. It's people come and go, people pray, people stay there throughout the day. There's things like that. Just walking into his house to get to the prayer room, you're walking through his private hallway. So it's not like it's his own area. I mean, it has that room is more being used for this, but you have to walk through his private hallway. That's his wife is going to be, and kids are going to be infringed on their privacy in somewhat if people are just walking in and out. So it's not really an ideal situation. I can't say that nothing could be flexible to try to make it work sometime, but as I'm saying, it's really not an ideal type of thing for a shul, like as a real shul. No, that's not how it is. That's the type of thing where you gotta knock and know that you're knock before coming and know that was a good time. So it's more something that's for like this, where we can try to make know that these are the specific prayer times or whatever it is, and this is the time you can come. But it's not just something that you're going to give up your home for 3 times a day. I mean, if you realize we're praying in the morning, early morning, getting ready for school is not a good time for that, and in the afternoon, which depends on the sun, when the sun goes down, and in the evening. So it's not something that's really an ideal thing to do in a home, but it's done sometimes. In a lot of places, it's done when it's needed, especially for walking. There's many Shabbos shuls around the country that people do try to do, make their home available for such a thing.
So there's not even a whisper of having daily services on these premises.
Yeah, that is not a plan at all. There's no plan of that. We're just looking to make a Shabbos shul. That's all we're talking about.
Is there so further to that end? Is there even a whisper, perhaps, of people coming by during the week? They like the space. They want to study in that space with their friends, with their groups. Is there any whispers of that?
So no, that's what I'm saying. There is no. It doesn't really even. It's not really something that's practical. I mean, you're not going to imagine stopping by somebody else's house, your house, and just, hey, knock knock, we come in and set up a little learning session over here. It's not really so practical, as I'm saying. It's not its own entrance even. He has an entrance that's not too far from there, but you're walking through his private hallway to get to that space. So they're being very nice to make themselves to avail that space to the shul to be able to do that, the Shabbos shul. But no, it's not really a practical thing to just be able to. It wasn't not for prayers, not for a learning session during the week. That's not something that we're talking about, and that's not something that's really plausible. I would say it's technically you could make that happen sometime. It's really not practical.
And you don't plan on being present at the premises anyway on the regular days. Only on Shabbos, Shabbat, and high holidays. Do you anticipate being present there?
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
And that's the formal scope of your involvement with Mr. Grand?
Yeah, that's all. I didn't know him before. This is the only thing we've been discussing. You know, this is all it's about.
So let's say even though it's situated now as, let's call it a Shabbos shul prayer room, let's say it takes off, the space takes off, it proves to be very popular. People in the area, they want to bring their +1s, their +2s, their friends. It's a nice space. Let's say it does take off. Do you think that space itself can carry the capacity of such a popularity for the space?
So, I mean, listen, we set up, there's 10 tables in there, 10 small tables in there, there's 21 chairs. As I'm saying, listen, if you want to put another 22nd chair, I guarantee you could. The 23rd, that probably also. It's not meant for expansion. It's not meant for that. We would have to move to the next place, move to a larger place, a place that really functions as a shul if we don't become such a thing down the line. As I've said, you know, listen, Amazon started in a garage. They're not in a garage currently, but they started there. So yeah, if it takes off, we'll move on and move to a bit bigger and better place. But you know, at this point, it's not really suitable for that. We have the 21 chairs or something that's set up there, and yes, we can maybe fit a couple more in there to accommodate. But it's really not something that you can just keep on shoving chairs in there. It's, you know, if you look at the pictures, you'll see that there's tables throughout the room. And the chairs are set throughout the tables. You know, it's the space is really utilized.
Sure. So, though we do know that Mr. Grand, I think everyone here knows that he has a proclivity for expansion. He's not shy to go ahead and build space if he feels he needs it. Do you have any whispers whatsoever of him building out any further than he already has?
So
to accommodate perhaps the popularity.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. To accommodate if it turns out to be a popular space.
So we have never spoken about such a thing. I must admit that we did speak in just like passing about an option of another location, like if it would get bigger. There was such a topic. It wasn't in his place, but there was such a topic. I won't mention the specific places. It's not really purposeful now, but it wasn't you know, his property at all. So there was, but you know, we never talked about an expansion of that. I don't know what the laws are, but I guarantee that it's going to be required to go through a rigorous process if we want to do that. That's well beyond this special use permit. So that was never discussed at all. That was never in my mind even like an option.
Nor rededicating any existing portions of his residence to serve as prayer space.
So no, the answer is we actually did a little bit speak about that, just because we spoke about, like, you know, typically to maintain the dignity in the prayer services, we have men in one area, women in another area, in any normal Orthodox shul. That's how it typically is, whether upstairs or side by side or whatever it is. We spoke about, like, is there a way to do it? Is there not a way to do it? And there was no way to do that in any practical way. They were not planning to give up their next rooms, which isn't really there. You know, there's a bathroom next to it, little hallway bathroom. It's not like there's another adjacent room really that's practical. And for that reason, as was sent out in the email, this is really just for men. We're not here for kids even that are going to be running around. Kids that are, you know, closer to the bar mitzvah age where they're ready to stay and sit for prayers, then yes. We're not here to entertain the kids. Many shuls even have babysitting for kids, so that way the parents can come. It's not something that we're able to do. It's not something that's fit for us. And it's just one room. It's one prayer room, and whatever fits in there. That's what I'm saying. So we couldn't accommodate. You know, women are not required to come to this prayer on Shabbos. Some like to do it, and that's you know, encouraged. And if they could do, that's great. But it's not required. So this place is more to accommodate people that, you know, don't have that need, where the woman and the younger children would want to go to a prayer, and they would have to go to somewhere else. It's not something that we could really accommodate in this place.
Mr. Rosenfeld, I just wanted to interject and say to everybody here, I have no interest in changing the shape of my house at all, or expanding outside the parameters of my prayer room whatsoever. No offense to the rabbi or anyone, but even if this thing were to get, let's say, popular, I'm curtailing it. I'm personally not going to be interested in having all sorts of people, and I would not be expanding in any way.
Mr. Grant, I have a few
an opportunity to be redirected on. I afforded that, but we need to, because of time, and there are so many people who I know want to speak. I want to make sure that order here. So if we could just.
I have one final question for Rabbi Roskam. Just one last question for Rabbi Roskam. So in Judaism, there is a ritual immersion concept of a ritual immersion pool, otherwise known as a mikvah. It's used on certain occasions by men and women, depending, it comes up. There are synagogues in town that have, and there has recently been in University Heights, built a freestanding mikvah. Certain synagogues in Beechwood and University Heights, they have mikvahs functioning as well. Is there any talk or even feasibility of having a mikvah constructed on these premises?
So actually, the first time I ever heard about that option, that talk was literally just now as you mentioned it. It's really not a feasible thing. Typically, mikvahs are tried to be made in actually a more private way. I'm not going to get involved in all the reasons, but people don't want to go to such a place when it's in a more of a public place, and therefore it's typically not right next to houses. If they could do it, they try to make a wall or something. It's really not done. It takes a lot of work to make a mikvah. A mikvah, immersion pool, there's many halachic ramifications. It basically needs to be almost mimicking a natural well or something like that. It takes a lot of work. It's not something that could be really redone, and I don't think there's a need for it anyway. It's not feasible. It's not really a need. It was never talked about. My understanding is, as you mentioned, they really just built one over here in University Heights, a freestanding mikvah. So no, it was never mentioned. It's not something that I would consider, really feasible. I don't think there's a need.
So Rabbi Roskam, actually, I promised I promise is my actual final question. You're new to town. You're a rabbi. You're in the Jewish community. Reputation matters to some degree in that community. Are you looking for any drama whatsoever or discord?
I absolutely not. So I wish, I've gone around with to try to speak to some neighbors to try to make sure that we could work with everybody. And if we get approved, it still is going to, that invitation is still going to be open. I want to make sure everything's okay with everybody. I spoke to many rabbis in the area, in University Heights, Beechwood area, before this, and to ensure that it was something that was what was wanted and everybody was on board. Everybody thought that it would be a positive thing. So with the rabbis, with the community, the Jewish community I spoke to, and people, the neighbors on the block we spoke to, some, were enthusiastic about it, some were less. Some did not want it, obviously, and I'm sure we're going to hear from some of them. And as I told them, even those that didn't want to sign on, we're always here to try to work with you to try to, at least make things accommodate where we could. Again, we don't know if it's going to get approved or not, but if it is approved, we are going to try to work with all our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors regardless. So no, I'm certainly the last guy that wants to make any drama or some sort of anything like that. I hope this works only to the benefit of everybody in the community.
Thank you, Rabbi Roskam. At this point, I leave it to the discretion of Mr. McConville and the council. I would really like to hear what the neighbors have to think. I would really like to engage in some dialogue here. We've been talking for quite some time, and I appreciate everyone's patience.
Well, before we do that, we're going to take this in order. And the order in which we're doing this is we're allowing you to make your presentation and call the witnesses that are in favor. And once you have completed that and everybody who has spoken in favor has spoken, we will then turn to anyone who would care to speak in opposition. So do you have anybody else you wish to present in your case in chief?
I don't have anyone I wish to present. If there is anyone in favor, I suppose that person should present him or herself, just to quickly say so.
Well, we will get to that, but I want to make sure that you have covered everything you wish to discuss in your case in chief. You did mention some documents. You haven't covered that. If that's something you wish to present, this would be the time.
Mayor, if I could interject, the documents will be considered part of the record.
Okay.
For expediency's sake, it may be helpful to move things along, and then there will be another period where the commission members may have some questions for the applicant, and that might.
I believe that's also appropriate.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Well then, if you are resting on your case in chief, I would then. I mean, I want to confirm that you are resting so that we can then ask if there's anybody else who wants to speak in favor.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favor? I see there are several hands up. They may not necessarily be in favor, though. So right now I'm looking for people who are interested in speaking in favor. I see Jeremy Sandock. Are you intending to speak in favor, sir? And if so,
yes, sir.
You unmute and you may proceed. Please keep it brief. There are a lot of people who want to speak. Mr. McConville's going to swear you in.
Mr. Sandock, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may proceed, Mr. Sandberg.
Okay, so I live across the street, kind of diagonally from Mr. Grand. I've been living here for about 3 years. We've got 6 children, and
What is your address?
I'm sorry?
Your address for the record?
2320.
Okay, thank you.
So when I heard about, I've had the Shabbos meals with Mr. Grand a bunch of time, brought my whole family over there, and we had a really good time, and nobody was bothered by that. We were quiet, we didn't disturb neighbors. And when we talked about a couple of weeks ago that he may be able to have what's called a minyan, a prayer quorum for Shabbos, I got actually pretty excited because I'm walking every Shabbos, like Mr. Grant explained, miles and miles, and I'm schlepping my kids around, and it's just having something across the street from my house. I know there's about another dozen people in the area here who could definitely benefit from this. We're not going to be driving. We're going to be walking. It's the same path that we walk either way. So I don't see a problem here as long as we abide by what Mr. Grant said he was going to do with the prayer room, and we keep it small. And I just really see no reason why somebody could object to that if that's the true intent and purpose of the prayer room. It's to help the people in the community who do that walk every week and go in the snow. And sometimes I can't even go in the snow because the sidewalks haven't been plowed yet, with the stroller or whatever. And I guess that's all I have to say. I'm definitely for having this.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sandock. Is there anybody else who would care to speak in favor of the application? I see that Mr. Curran's hand is up, Mr. Cooney's hand is up, Ms. Holzheimer's hand is up. Are you here to speak in favor? I see Frederick. Okay, that's a no, it looks like. Somebody with the handle November 18, are you speaking in favor? Doesn't appear. How about Frederick's Fire? I see your hand is up. Are you speaking in favor?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good, Mr. If you would state your name, full name and address for the record, then you may proceed. Thank you.
My name is Fred Bolleton.
Just a moment. I'm sorry. Mr. McConville has to swear you in, and then you may state your name and address for the record.
Okay.
Mr. Bolleton, do you affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. My name is Fred Bolleton. I live at 2383 Miramar. I've been here at that address for almost 36 years. One of the things that attracted me was the quietness of the street, even more so now that the school isn't open up the block. But it's always been a wonderful street with people being very friendly. We see each other on the street and saying hello. Never been any real problems that way. And I don't think this would add to any problems. As long as Mr. Grant says that he would not allow parking in his driveway, I can't see parking in cars, vehicular traffic to be an issue because, again, because they would not be allowed to drive on the Sabbath, and there is no on-street parking overnight permitted. Nobody would be able to park their cars and leave it there for the entire time. So I don't think there will be any vehicular issues at all in terms of residential pedestrian traffic. I don't think there'll be a large number, and I don't think it's a bad thing that we're walking up and down the street on occasion. I do that every week, and especially during the pandemic when nobody's been able to do anything, people have just walked up and down the block, and there's never been any problem. I don't believe with that. The concern would be, again, if it was going to expand, but he indicated that he's not willing to use his house. If he was trying to, I was initially concerned that he was going to try and turn the house into a synagogue and therefore claim a religious exemption for tax purposes. And he's assured me that that's not going to be the case. He'll be paying his property taxes on the entire property. So I think that it is a positive thing, especially since this street and streets to the west of us have not been streets that that observant Jewish people have chosen to live on because it's so far from a synagogue. The fact that if this was there, it may attract more people, and I do think that if anything, it would have a positive effect on property values. So I really don't see any negatives to it, and I think there are possible positives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. Is there anybody else here to speak in favor of the application? All right. I'm not seeing any.
Is Christopher Cooney? I'm just wondering if Christopher Cooney or Katie Holzheimer. I see they have digital hands up.
Yeah, not in favor.
I think they indicated they were going to speak in opposition.
So Danny is
Fair
actually
enough.
trying to speak right now.
I'm sorry, Mr. Diggs, were you asking to be recognized?
Danny is actually trying to speak. Daniel is trying to speak right now.
Yes, I am quickly. I just, one of these, the thing I do have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 individuals who are immediate neighbors of mine that live within 3 or 4 houses of me on Miramar that are in support of it. And that has been submitted to the record. It's not a very long.
Hasn't he already submitted his information?
You have.
I'm just stating that there's another 9 or 10 Miramar neighbors that are also in support of it besides Mr. Sondak.
You've had your testimonial.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Okay, thank you.
You have rested your application, your case, and we do have we do have your filing with those names. So thank you. Okay, and the Planning Commission members have them as well. Is there anybody else intending to speak in favor? Seeing none, we will now move on to members from the public who are here to speak in opposition. As Mr. McConville indicated, there is an opportunity as per the revised code for cross-examination. I see Mr. Cooney's hand is up, and Mr. McConville, if you would swear in Mr. Cooney, and then Mr. Cooney, you may state your full name and address for the record.
You swear the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I will.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooney. You may proceed.
Hi, my name is, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking on behalf of the significant number of homeowners.
If you would start with your name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. 2319 Miramar Boulevard, Christopher Cooney.
Okay. You may proceed. Thank you.
All right. I'm speaking on behalf of a significant number of homeowners from Miramar Boulevard and its surrounding area. I want to be clear that our position is that approval for the special use permit is not in the best interest of the city. It has nothing to do with Mr. Grant's faith or his desire to have a house of assembly. It is mainly about the request for special permit for a business, essentially converting it from a residence to a business. However, the information I will present will be based on the information on his application. But I want to make sure that the opposition is about the variance for that. To start with, my wife and I moved to University Heights in June of 2003. We have 2 boys that have grown up in the area that are at Jesus School right now. We love the area. I grew up in Cleveland Heights. She grew up in Shaker Heights. We sort of met in the middle here at University Heights. We've made improvements to the house, like many other families, because this is our home. This is where we live. This is where our family is, and we've made many good friends, over the years, and they've enjoyed their homes. And it's always good to see when somebody, makes an investment in a home to try to make it better. And this is information that Mr. Grand filed in an email to the city on January 22nd, 2021, by email. He had said that his intention is to utilize the recreation room for periodic religious gatherings. It does not specify types of ceremonies or activities or the frequency of activities. For the special variance that he is asking for, this could literally be any day of the week at any time. And I refer to as his specific writing of periodic religious gatherings. As he stated, he's always said that is as submitted, and it's also in his email from January 22, 2021. He has already purchased 11 tables and 21 chairs. And per the rabbi that spoke earlier, he can add more chairs to accommodate more people. And Mr. Rosenfeld, his counsel, has also stated tonight that Mr. Grant has a proclivity for expansion. With the 21 chairs at a minimum, there is an expectation of at least 21 people at these unspecified periodic gatherings. And he has stated every night that he prays every day of the year. There may be a dozen or so people, which may be there, although earlier tonight, he said there may be 8 to 10. And with that, there seems to be some conflicting information as to what is being presented, what is being said, and even what is being said tonight. He has said there is no parking in the driveway, so it is expected that with these periodic religious activities, there could be at least 21 cars on the street. On the eastbound side of Miramar, there are 24 lots of Miramar between Washington Boulevard and Silsbee Road. This means potentially there could be one car in front of each house or each lot between Washington Boulevard and Silsbee. I know Mr. Grant has said that his attention may be for only during Sabbath, but again, in his email to the Planning Commission, he references periodic. It is not specific, and it does not state when these will actually occur. He's also stated that he does not. He also says it's going to be for close friends. These are going to be informal gatherings. The informal gatherings require at least 10 men. And currently, on January 10th, 2021, on the website godavin.com, he has advertised for his site, his shul, his temple, whatever it is. And the purpose of godavin.com, as listed on their site, was revamped to help people like you find a minyan no matter where they are. If it is for invite only, why is he advertising on a website for traveling minions? There is an implied message here that those that are coming from out of town will be coming in and staying at the house or local. So this really doesn't seem to be informal. It seems to be structured. And he did reference that brownies and Cub Scouts are prayer groups, and that's really, quite frankly, that's not a fair comparison. That is a school activity. That is something that they're not meeting. You're not adding to the house. They're not moving the house around. A lot of it is done at school, which has also been zoned appropriately. He also, at a previous planning commission meeting regarding a variance for this driveway, he had affirmed under oath that his house is for personal use and not for a business. He said his business is in New York. And all of a sudden, there seems to be a change in plans. Mr. Grant also dropped off a letter at the neighbors 2 days ago on March 2nd, 2021. And in the letter, he says, we pray 3 to 4 times a day, every day. It may not seem like much, but on the Jewish Sabbath and high holidays, when driving is not permitted, my family must walk back and forth 4 to 6 times over a 24-hour period, and that is a lot of walking. I understand that Mr. Grant is from New York. I would like to believe that he's probably, before he moved here to Cleveland, was very familiar with the weather. And I would think at the same time, as he was looking for a home, that the location of his home to the temple may have been considered with that. Because right now it seems like he's just upset about the long walk. And this is what this really is kind of all about. So if he's concerned about, and this is from his, again, letter from March 2nd, 2021 to the neighbors, that is just an informal prayer group on the Jewish Sabbath and high holidays when Jews can't drive cars. If that is a case where it's informal prayer group, and why is there 11 tables? Why is there 21 chairs? And based on testimony from his rabbi, why does he need a rabbi for this is all? Why is there even consultation going on? So there seems again to be some conflicting messages and for what he says and what he writes and what we're hearing tonight. There seems to be just A lot of inconsistency. And he says that there are no hours of operation, and this is not a public facility. Again, however, if you go to godevon.com, it does describe hours for operation on Fridays and on Saturdays. Again, this is another conflict for what is happening. So his comment with it about the property values that they'll provide a benefit, talking about the house that was sold next door to him. He needs to keep in mind that right now his house is labeled for residential use. It has not been given a special variance. And so the person that bought the house bought it in good faith that it is a residential neighborhood. The reason why the property values are going up is about supply and demand. There is limited supply and there is great demand. And University Heights as a city is benefiting from that, not from Mr. Grand's potential use or request for the special variance. So the University Heights Ordinance 127402E states that a special use permit may be issued to the Planning Commission for land fronting on other streets. And as it was described, Warrensville Center, Cedar Road, Green Road, those are main streets, main arteries to accommodate that. Where the applicants demonstrates by clear and convincing evidence that the use will benefit and not impair surrounding property values or uses. And Mr. Grand, and through his attorney, Robbie, has provided no actual written evidence that having the special variance approved will actually increase property values. It's all opinion. We're not dealing with facts. Vehicle parking. I understand, and so it's very well documented and everyone understands that you cannot drive on the Sabbath. However, periodic religious activities, that can happen at any time during the week. With the number of chairs and its proclivity for expansion, that could greatly increase, and that could be a significant impact on the street. Pedestrian congestion or traffic conditions. Again, I'm going to refer to potential increased parking on street based on its proclivity for expansion. And again, no specific defined actions as to when these activities will take place. So the special use permit does not benefit, but may actually impair surrounding property values. It will cause parking and pedestrian congestion, impede traffic, cause noise pollution, and frequent parking scenarios. So if the cars were to take up the entire length of the street, where are my friends supposed to park? Where are my neighbors' friends supposed to park? Now it becomes, it's a chain reaction, it's a domino effect. It does not add to public health, and it does not add to the safety and for the welfare of the surrounding area. It is not true. University Heights Order 127402 F2 states the conversion of a residence, store, or other building for a use defined in section 1704.01 is prohibited. And the purpose why the city planners put that in there is because there's no frontage for the property. This is a residential neighborhood. It's a house. It is a home. It is not a business. If it were to get a special variance, literally any house in the city of University Heights could apply for a special variance, get it approved, and the University Heights will no longer be the city of beautiful homes. We'll have a bunch of businesses. So that is not going to add to property values. I would argue that it's actually going to decrease property values. We have the same concerns as the Churchill Road area and want to keep the zoning as residential. We do not want to change the zoning. I cannot be more clear on this. The Churchill Road area went through a similar situation, and obviously, we want to make sure that actually happens. The City Planning Commission has received in excess 200 signatures. That includes 28 out of 39 homes in support of maintaining the current zoning code, keeping the code, not changing the code. We request that the commission denies the request for special use permit at 2343 Miramar Boulevard. And out of the 11 homes that did not sign, 2 of the homes were not occupied at the time as they were being sold or the process of being sold. So there's actually no one to contact at that time. Any change to the zoning code will have a negative impact to the city and set a precedent that any residence or home could be converted into any type of business. The city planners had a clear vision of the businesses that could be maintained on main roads, such as Cedar Road, Warrensville Center, South Taylor, Green, Fairmount Boulevard, and North Park Boulevard. There's a reason why those roads have been developed as a business, and they are not residential. And that's why the zoning codes are that way. The counter is the city is not, or that the counter is that the cities are not surrounded by residents or homes, but over access to them and adequate parking and safe roads. That is not the case with a special permit. Again, I'm kind of referring that he has not provided any clear or convincing evidence that the approval for the special variance should be allowed. He has offered opinion, he's not offered facts. A couple other points, his designated modest space has increased during his renovations. And he has expanded his living room in a previous garage space as a music room. So the rabbi has also stated tonight that it is not an ideal situation. He also stated that there is an entrance in for the main house, but in fact, there is an actual entrance at the former garage. So people do not have to go through the main hallway. They could actually enter at the proposed shul for what he wants to do. Also in the letter, Mr. Grant says it's an informal prayer room. But then again, this seems to be a more formal request. Again, there is a lot of contradictions. And this is not about having people over for lunch. It's about changing the code, impacting the city, which will set a precedent. This is about benefiting only Mr. Grant. It does not provide a benefit to the neighborhood, and it does not provide a benefit to the city. This seems to be about an inconvenience of his walking. He has described the rooms, but has provided no actual evidence that will benefit the neighborhood and the city, and has only offered his opinion and not presented any actual facts. This is a city of beautiful homes. It is our desire to keep the homes in the neighborhood so we can continue to enjoy the city. We also request that to keep the cease and desist order in effect and to deny the special permit request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooney. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you wish to cross-examine Mr. Cooney?
I would like to cross-examine him. I would just also like to make a general response, if I might.
Well,
I don't know what's appropriate in this.
Ask me a question. Don't talk. You want to talk? Ask me a question.
Yes, there will be a period for rebuttal later. So if you don't have any cross-examination at this time.
No, I do. I do.
You do have cross-examination. Okay, you may proceed.
Yeah. Mr. Cooney, nice to meet you.
Hello.
When did you first hear about this proposed use?
It was probably 2 months ago. Within the last 2 months.
What did you first hear? What were your first impressions of what was going around?
I was concerned as to why you'd want to turn a house into a temple or shul. That was a concern.
What makes you think he's trying to turn his house into a temple?
By the testimony you and Mr. Grant have provided today.
Is it not true that he's trying to turn, or really just use, one room in his house for prayer services, not his entire house?
Could you repeat the question?
Is it not true that Mr. Grant's proposed use implicates one room rather than every room and cranny of his house?
No, his special permit request is for 2343 Miramar, which implies the entire house.
So if there is an ability to narrow the specific, I know you also had a concern about the nature of the periodic gatherings. Taking the special use permit application in of itself, if there were a way to more narrowly tailor the wording of it, such that it would only and specifically implicate that room, which he has in fact prepared and would use as a prayer room, would you object to that still?
Yes, and it seems like based on your statement right now, he has been preparing this room for a lot longer than 2 months.
I'm not sure how I'm not allowed to give a response, but I'm not sure how
that's what you just said. That's what you said. I'm just responding to your statement.
Please don't.
Is it not true?
You would just limit to cross-examination.
Right, yeah. Is it not true that is it not true that we've heard that Mr. Grant designed and has used that exact space as a music room?
No, I'm gonna interject here, Mayor, just for a second, because this is a less formal process certainly than a court of law. But if you could confine cross-examination to Mr. Cooney's actual testimony.
Thank you.
Sure.
As the mayor mentioned, planning commission members are likely to have questions for the applicant, and the applicant may have the opportunity during that question and answer period to rebut some of the testimony that occurs. I would suggest, unless you truly have an issue for cross, that you utilize that time
No, that's fine.
as a forum for rebutting testimony that's provided.
We can move on.
Luke and Mayor, is it possible for the planning commissioners to ask a question or two to the witness?
I was going to wait, but there is the possibility that if Mr. Cooney were to step off the call, that you would be deprived that opportunity. Mr. McConville, would it be?
When you say the witness, do you mean Mr. Cooney?
Yeah, I have one question for Mr. Cooney.
Yeah, that's really not the way it's set up. It really is not.
Okay.
Luke and the mayor, how do we have a time frame for this tonight? How late do you anticipate this going?
I don't know.
I have commitments after 10 o'clock.
Well, I hope to have this completed this evening.
Okay, I have to drop off at 10 o'clock.
All right. Well, we will try to be economical with our time.
I think that's being respectful of everyone here. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you advising. Okay, thank you.
I just to just clarify with Mr. McConville and Your Honor, in order to make a decision on what's coming before the Planning Commission, there may be questions that they have regarding something that a witness says, and it's difficult to analyze without getting clarity.
Okay. Very well, Mr. McConville.
Well, Mayor, you're the chair. I just, the concern is that the residents are here to voice their opinion, and I'm reluctant to have them subjected to, Planning Commission Q&A when they are not applying for anything. They're just here to speak to the application.
Right. Mr. Fine, what is the nature of your question?
Well, Mr. Cooney emphasized his concern about the extensive use of the property and the terminology in the application of periodic as being open-ended, and so I was curious if he would maintain his objection if the application was limited in such a way, in accordance with what they testified to, that they were only
I believe that question was asked and answered by Mr. Rosenfeld and then Mr. Cooney, where Mr. Cooney basically said that he would object.
Yeah, I mean, it essentially is about the approval for special variance. I just responded to the application, but the larger picture is that it will have it'll set a precedent. Any house in the city could apply for the special variance for any type of business.
Very good. All right. Then what we'll do then is we will move on to the next witness. Thank you, Mr. Cooney. Thank you, Mr. Fine.
Thank you.
I'm going to call Katie Holtzheimer next. Ms. Holtzheimer, Mr. McConville will swear you in, and then you'll state your name and address for the record, and you'll proceed.
You swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Okay, you may proceed, starting with your name and address for the record.
My name is Katie Holzheimer. I live at 2365 Fenwood Road in University Heights, which is a few streets away from Miramar. I have lived in University Heights pretty much my whole life, Cleveland Heights and University Heights. I raised my boys here. My husband and I live here. We're planning on staying here. We're members of Jesu Parish. My boys, 3 out of 4, live in the area. So we're very vested. This is our community. And I've had many friends that are Jewish throughout the years that are still my close friends, that are amazing people. I think as a population, they're amazing people. So, but I have some issues with this variance, and I have two issues, and they go hand in hand. And one, I might direct, and I'm not familiar with this format, so forgive me, Mayor, but I might direct one question to the rabbi who spoke, who is pretty new to the area.
Yes.
And we
Well,
welcome you.
the questions will have to be hypothetical because it's not, this isn't a volley, so.
Okay, very good. So my one question would be, does Rabbi, respectfully, do you have a temple right now? Would the shul proposed to be on Miramar be considered your temple? Would you be the spiritual leader of that group? And assuming this variance would take place, would you then be the rabbi as a group? So that goes hand in hand with my second issue, which is the variance, which the legalese of it, I don't know. But to get the variance, is the variance only for the shul and the 10 men meeting once a week, walking, and then assuming it's successful and you want to add further to your structure, Mr. Grand, and do you need another variance for that? Would that be a whole nother zoning issue in the future? Like, I think part of this really, we need to look to the future and see what is what for what this variance is and what this means to the community going forward. Because we're all vested in the community and it needs to be very clear what the steps for the future would be. So that's really my question and my issue. And I don't know what else to say, but you know, this is all respectfully submitted, et cetera. And that's something that needs to be discussed. Like, how would this look for the future? Not just tomorrow, or if the variance really occurred, what would happen in the future? I have grandchildren that go to Jesus school. This is my community, and we all have a part to play as members of the community. So that's pretty much all I need to say. And I appreciate you, Mayor, calling on me. Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Holtzheimer. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. Holtzheimer based upon her testimony?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Then thank you, Ms. Holtzheimer. I'm going to put your hand down and I will call on, looks like Lanny. If Mr. McConville, if you could swear in whoever is testifying. Who is?
It's going to be his wife, Adrian. I'm sorry, it says.
Can you state your name and address for the record?
Yes,
Please?
it's Adrian Yelsky, and we're at 2336 Miramar Boulevard.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed.
Okay, since everybody's going back to their history, we've been in this house for 46 years. And I taught at Cleveland Heights High School for 30 of those years. My children and my 16 AFS students all graduated from Cleveland Heights High School. So we're very vested in this community, and I'm a Heights graduate myself. I have a few concerns, and that is that we have been living here waiting to see what is going to happen across the street from us for over 2 years. And I'm very sympathetic, of course, that there were problems with contractors, et cetera, but as neighbors, we have all lived through this and basically almost had like bets going as to what is going to go in this place. Particularly, we had some suspicions early on when literally 2 years ago, when the Grands moved in and we were trying to be welcoming and walked across the street, as did our next door neighbor, and introduced ourselves. And upon finding out that my husband and our next door neighbor were both Jewish, Mr. Grand at that point said, well, when we're all finished, maybe you guys will come over here to daven. That was 2 years ago, people. So that to me is already very suspect. From that day on, I thought, okay, something is going to happen here. And then even listening to Rabbi Roskam today, when he said, a neighbor of my sister's neighbor across the street wanted to discuss a project with Mr. Grant. That means that there was a project going on. This is a project. This is not something that he woke up 2 weeks ago, as he said in his paper. Now it will be 4 weeks ago. And went, dang, that's what I should do, is cut down on the walking. You know what? Over 2 years ago, when he bought this property, all of those structures were already in place on Green Road. He knew that he was going to have to walk, and yet he chose to buy the house here. This is, to me, this is such an empty kind of a reason for doing this. And then the other thing is, I wonder where is there a financial thing here? Are we doing, is he doing this out of the charity, the goodness of his heart? Is Rabbi Roskam, who is new to Cleveland, is this going to be like a charity thing that he's just doing this? I mean, we're talking about how many days are there? How many Friday nights and all day Saturday? And how many fast days are there? And how many other holidays that I could name are there? We're talking about, this could be 50 days a year that he's going to be devoting to being here and running services. For what? For $18 donation, maybe, from people that come. That's a traditional number that would be a donation, perhaps. There's got to be a moneymaker here too, and maybe there isn't, and that would be wonderful. But this is not right. This is not what this community needs. I think it's wonderful that they're here. It's wonderful. I can hardly wait till it's nice again and I could see those children outside, and along with all the other children outside, but not as a place of worship. We don't want a bank in this block. We don't want a car wash on this block. We don't want a grocery store on this block. We don't want a church in this block. Nothing like that. We are peacefully living here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. Yelsky? I can't hear you, Mr. Rosenfeld. Or I can't hear you, Mr. Rosenfeld. Okay, it looks like it's a no. All right, very good. Then thank you, Mrs. Yelsky. I see some other hands still up. Dave Curran, your hand has been up for some time. I'm going to call on you next. And Mr. McConville, if you would swear in Dave Curran.
Yes, and before I swear in Mr. Curran, I just want to remind everyone, if you don't have the floor, if you could mute your phone, computer. We're getting an occasional bell ringing or other noises that can be distracting to the speaker. With that, Mr. Curran, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Mr. Curran, if you'd state your name and address for the record, and then you may proceed.
Yeah, David Curran, live at 4049 Meadowbrook. We lived here 30 years. I heard Mr. Rosenfeld say that there were a minimum of 10 prayers every week. And then Mr. Grant said he's bought 24 chairs. I'd like to know what the maximum is every week, maximum number of prayers that he's aiming for. Other than that, I would second all the comments of Mr. Cooney. In the interest of time, I'll just second his his statements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curran. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Mr. Curran based upon his statements?
Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you.
I do not.
Okay, very good. Then we will move to June Stanitz, who had her hand up. Mr. McConville, if you would swear in Ms. Stanitz.
Ms. Stanitz, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. My name is June Stanitz, and I live at 14157 Washington Boulevard. I've been a resident here in this house for about 30 years. It seems like I've heard no definitive information tonight about the number of anticipated people that will be meeting. At first, it was said that, 8 to 10 people will be meeting. And then I hear that there's 24 chairs and 10 tables. Only 2 people to a table? That seems a little bit suspect to me. Also, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear what the dimension of the meeting, the prayer room is. And I just wondered, are there any regulations by the fire department about what's the maximum occupancy in a room? So if this tends to grow and more people are enjoying this and want to meet and want to congregate, will people be turned away? Or will that room grow? What is the size of the room? That's, I guess, the bottom line question that I'm asking. And I know the parking is always an issue in University Heights when we have delivery trucks. Sometimes there's vehicles parked on both sides of the streets. Every year there's John Carroll students parked on the street, and I'm told we'll call the city. And I don't feel it's my responsibility to call. If there are cars in the street that don't belong there, aren't you supposed to have permits on them? Sometimes they're overnight, sometimes they're there for 2 days. So again, that's just another thing that I think will be a potential problem. So I just wish these concerns could be addressed, please. Thank you.
Just as a matter of information, all the board members, planning commission members, have a copy of the application, which does provide a floor plan. The room is subdivided into 2 sections. One's 22 by 22, one's 15 by 15. So approximately 484 square feet and then 225 square feet. We have not, I do not believe we've sent in anyone from our Fire Prevention Bureau to verify that or to ascertain a maximum occupancy. Were this to operate as a house of assembly, those numbers would ultimately have to be determined. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. Stanitz?
I do not.
Okay, very good. Then we will continue on. I see a hand for Carrie and Leonard. I don't know who among you would be testifying, but Mr. McConville, if you would swear in whoever that would be.
Yes, can you state your name for the record?
I'm from 2363 Lallemont Road.
Can you repeat that?
You need to speak up, please.
Carrie Hawkins, Lallemont Road.
Ms. Hawkins, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very good. If you could speak up, we're having a hard time hearing you. You may proceed.
My first statement is just that I would like to echo everything that Mr. Cooney said. I think that he was very well prepared and said everything very well. So I would just like to echo everything he said, and I wasn't on his list of people who he initially had discussed with, so I'd like to add myself to that list. My second question, I don't think that this has been mentioned as much, but I am a CPA and I've been living in University Heights for 32 years. And my inquiry with this is this going to be a tax exempt institution now? And if it is, what are the requirements for doing that? If you're going to be an invite only small group, not inclusive, compare that to the Temples on Green Road, compare that to Jesuit Church. there's a little bit of a difference there. So what are the requirements to be a religious institution and to be inclusive? I am honestly not specialized in this area. I am inquiring. I would like to know. I would also like to know on that forefront, if this is approved, would I be able to also have tax exempt status for my home if I wanted to have a Bible study group? Or, what would I have to do to have a tax exempt status on my primary residence? So
Those are
that's my
questions, but they're probably beyond the scope of what we're considering this evening. Mr. McConville, what do you think?
I'm not going to curtail the testimony of residents. I would ask them to try to stick to the application and the issues and to be concise when possible. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. You may proceed.
question is, we mentioned the indoors, and I know that's probably in the scope of this as well, but will there be any outdoor activities for the religious activities as well?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's been any testimony on that. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for this resident? Okay, appears to be a no. All right, very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, there is somebody whose handle is November 18. Your hand's been up for a while. If you would unmute, Mr. McConville will swear you in. If you would state your name and address for the record so he could then swear you in. November 18. If you would unmute.
Are you talking to me, Mayor?
No, I was not. There's somebody whose handle is November 18.
It's Mary Lou McHenry.
Is that who that is? Ms. McHenry? Very good.
Say hello. Say hello.
I'm on.
Okay, we can hear you now. Mr. McConville, you swear in, Ms. McHenry?
Raise your hand. Raise your hand.
You swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
State your name and address for the record.
Thank you.
Name and address for the record.
My address for record is that I
Say your name.
do not live in University Heights. I have been a resident of University Heights for 44 years.
Okay, you're addressed currently then.
My address currently is 2673 Warrensville Center Road, Shaker Heights, Ohio. I'm at the spot where University Heights meets Shaker Heights. Right there. Okay, my name is Mary Lou McHenry, and as a resident of University Heights for 44 years, I need you to help me and the neighbors clarify how this has happened. A permit was applied for and plans were reviewed for an addition to 2343 Miramar Boulevard, which, by the way, used to be my next door neighbor. I lived there for 10 years in that little brick Tudor. Now, Mr. Grand, the owner, has decided his addition should serve as another purpose other than the original intent. Mr. Grand wants his home to become a house of worship. In a neighborhood of single-family homes, it is hard to understand how we are now at this point of considering pop-up or spot zoning on Miramar Boulevard. The neighbors should have had a right to read copies of all requests for variances that were previously issued by the city of University Heights. There are ordinances, I know, stipulating structures and boundaries. And if the property does not comply, they need to understand how and why the city gave this homeowner these variances. Instead, we are sitting here at the 11th hour, considering monumental changes that will have lasting effects on the entire community. To make a change to this structure and usage as atypical, and we are disappointed that you would not hit the pause button and dial back from the 11th hour and conduct business and abide by codes, zoning, ordinances, and laws that have been thoughtful, fair, and enforced by our past elected public officials. We all understand the COVID pandemic, the schedule changes at City Hall, and the work furloughs. However, this past year of upheaval cannot affect the citizens' right of this neighborhood change. They need to be heard and their opposition considered, as you are doing tonight. Thank you. As they have invested dearly in the University Heights community for decades. People want to live in a zoned single-family residential neighborhood, not in a community that adheres to spot pop-up zoning. Having listed and sold homes for over 30 plus years in the Heights, the number one reason buyers love University Heights, the city of beautiful homes, is that the city certainly has lived up to its motto. Solid, well-built, beautifully tree-lined streets with manageable, cared-for private lots, old world charm inside and out. It is a city with zoned single-family residential where people want to invest their money. And it in turn has become a generational investment where adult children return to the neighborhood with bikes, strollers, children playing, teenagers gathering, dog walking, a walkable neighborhood for everyone. Mr. Grand now states to meet in his house of worship home. Mr. Grand now states he would like 10 tables and 21 chairs for his friends to meet in his home of worship. That would mean many cars parked on the street, except on Friday, I think, and Saturday, adding to traffic that already does travel on this street. And in your, what am I trying to say? You have a, what does he have? Website, thank you. You have a website that talks about 7 days. So there is more than just the 2 days that you described today earlier. In a residential neighborhood of single-family homes, quiet enjoyment of their property is a homeowner's right. A house of worship, no matter what religion or belief, does not belong in these single-family residential zoned neighborhoods. It is the opposition to everyone's quiet enjoyment of their property. So I thank you for considering my statements, and I strongly urge you to reconsider granting spot pop-up zoning permits in any neighborhood of the city of University Heights zoned for single-family homes. I thank you for letting me speak. I think Mr. Cooney did a wonderful job. He had facts and it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ms. McHenry. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. McHenry?
Just one question, if I might.
Very good. It's confined to her testimony. If you may, then you may go ahead.
Pardon me?
Mr. Rosenfeld has a question for you.
Hello, ma'am. My one question is, how do you imagine Mr. Grand's proposed use would interfere with the quiet enjoyment of his neighbors' use of their own property?
Because of the confusion of all these people coming and going. It's common sense.
Very good. Thank you.
How many people do you... Sure. Okay, fine.
You were done. Okay.
I'm done. Okay. Well,
No, you may go ahead. I thought you had just one question. Go ahead.
I did, but it sort of opened another question, but it's fine. We can move on.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Let's see. I see Carolyn. Is it Dobrowski? It's partly cut off there. Carolyn, your hand is up. Do you want to proceed?
Yes, sorry.
Conville, will you swear this witness?
Yes. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. I affirm.
Okay. And will you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name's Caroline Dabrowski. My address is 2348 Lalamont Road. It is the home directly behind the section of the home proposed for the shul. Sorry, I'm currently breastfeeding my child, so I'm not on camera.
That's very good. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I know Mr. Grand said that he has been playing music in that portion of his home, that it's been soundproofed, and that it has not disturbed anybody, but I am pretty sure that the home that we purchased has been vacant for quite some time. So I'm not sure that anybody was really there to really hear that or kind of attest to that. The other thing is I've been a part of the Jesu University Heights community. So is my husband, Charles Schulte, and his parents who live on Glendon. As Mr. Cooney said and Mrs. McHenry so eloquently put, we're very concerned. We bought our home thinking that we're backing up to a residential lot with residential use, and never ever imagined that this would be allowed. And it just seems like everything is very open-ended. I'm very concerned about the fact that he's saying he's not going to expand, that there's not, but I just, like, we're just supposed to take his word for it. It just doesn't seem right. Everything seems very, just kind of, I don't know that he can describe in more detail, or if that we can limit the permit. I don't think that that's allowed. I'm concerned about the taxes. It's just not at all how I thought we'd be welcomed or be entering into this neighborhood, and we weren't really even told about it. Our neighbors are the ones that informed us of all of this.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any questions for this resident?
I do not.
Very good. Well, thank you then. And we will move on then to Vivian Porter. I know you've been waiting patiently. I am concerned about time, so if people could be economical about their comments, and if they're only covering new ground, and again, directed to the applicant and the application rather. So Mr. McConville, would you swear her in?
Mrs. Porter, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I just have a couple of questions. We're the closest neighbor to the Grand residence. We live 12 feet from this. This is such a big part of our lives.
Your street address again, just for the record.
2355 Miramar. We are exactly 12 feet away. And we cannot possibly just talk about the shul as being that many feet away, or it's only a certain portion of the house, because in Ohio, any part of the dwelling is what's going to be receiving this permit. So you'd be issuing a permit for a shul that is 12 feet from my house. Mr. Grand discusses parking. He is in complete refusal to comply with last summer's variance. He is parking on the lawn with his truck and has been doing so for 2 weeks with no notice from the city. That was something that we discussed in front of the BZA last summer, and he was denied the variance, but continues to park exactly there. People are saying, how could the Grands purchase this house without realizing where it was and knowing how far it was from Temple? I'm not sure if you're all aware, but the Grands moved from a house on Silsby, where they lived for 3.5 years. So they did not purchase the home on Miramar with no concept of where any temples or synagogues or shuls were. They've been in the University Heights now for 5 years. And yes, we totally heard him playing the drums all last summer. Despite what has been discussed here and this being a music soundproof room, we heard the drums being played many times after that variance I mentioned just a few minutes ago was denied. In complete retaliation, the drums went on into the night. So it's not super soundproof in any way. I guess the last thing I'd just like to say is it's so close to us, and we've been dealing with this. I have lived in the Heights for 65 years, and I'm begging you to please consider that this is a clear-cut case of spot zoning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Porter. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any questions for Ms. Porter?
I do not.
Very good. Then we will move on to Bridget Holzheimer. Mr. McConville, you swear her in?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Okay, you're muted.
You're on mute.
You are muted. Bridget, you're muted. There you go.
Am I on mute? Okay.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I have more. Mayor, is it okay if I give a comment, necessarily a question? Is it okay?
Yes, in fact, questions are not really appropriate.
Okay. So I haven't been a long-term University Heights resident. I'm actually from the West Side, but my husband's family, Holzheimers, are. And after listening to tonight, I guess I'm very confused and disturbed. And I think for me, I did a little bit of research on the background of Mr. Grand and his company and where he's from. And I would ask if it's possible for the Zoning Commission to look into a background. It's called Violation Removal, Inc., which is Mr. Grand's, I guess, original business. I don't know. I can't quote on that. Mr. Rosenfeld or Mr. Grand himself should probably speak for that. But the website is very confusing, just like tonight. I don't feel like things were actually clear cut. I think it went from 8 to 10 people to 20 to 23 people to all these different numbers. And it was very confusing as a resident. I live on Carroll Boulevard. And I love my neighborhood very well, 4156 Carroll Boulevard. And I don't find the Q&A nonsense that happened tonight between Mr. Rosenfeld and Mr. Grand was a bit ridiculous. And I found it to be insulting. And I think to get to the point of what we really need to figure out is what Mr. Cooney and others prepared themselves to do. So I feel like it was very insulting and confusing. And just like the website that I pointed out is the same exact thing that Mr. Grand's thing, his company, all the promises, but nothing following through. And that's what I feel like. I feel terrible for Miramar because I don't think they're necessarily getting the right answers. So that's just my comment.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. Holzheimer. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any direct examination for this witness?
What is your specific concern with this proposed use?
Honestly, I don't think you gave any clear answers. And the fact that your client, I guess is what we'll call it, couldn't even answer for himself, I don't know what to say about that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, we will then move to Sherry Frum. Mr. McConville.
Yes, before we proceed, I want to just address a couple things for the benefit of Planning Commission members and for the audience as well.
Very good.
One is just to reorient people or orient them. You are addressing the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission members are the members who will vote on the application. Secondly, to the extent possible, please try to keep your remarks confined to the issues of the land use and the application. And then lastly, just for purposes of clarity, I do want to note for the record that the additions on both sides of the home at 2343 Miramar did not require variances. They were permitted use, no variance additions where building permits were issued because no building code was impacted or violated. That is largely a function of the size of the lot. Secondly, the BZA hearings that occurred were properly noticed, and they were also well attended by various neighbors, speaking for and against the proposed variances. And that was an instance where hearings were continued over a period of time, and some variances requested were granted, others were denied. Lastly, the Chapter 1274 that's under consideration this evening is a law that has been on the books in University Heights since 1982. It has been updated periodically over time, but it was initially enacted in 1982, was updated in 1990, again in 1999, and then I believe again a last time in 2008. With that, I will swear in Ms. Frum. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I affirm.
Very good. You may proceed. And state your name.
My name is Sherry Frum. I live at 2575 Rubyville in University Heights. We've lived here for 32 years. And I would just like to state my concerns. Mr. Grant says that he only wants to do this on Friday night and Saturday. My concern is for the area that it will move to 7 days a week, 3 times a day, as the Orthodox Jews do pray 7 days a week and 3 times a day. My concern is also for the area and their neighbors that it does turn into a learning center, like a kollel that's around the corner from me. And I personally believe that a synagogue should be in a building accessible to many, many people and not just 10 men, as Mr. Grant stated. I don't believe that it should be in a house. And that is just my personal belief as a Jew in University Heights. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Ms. Brown?
I do not.
Very good. Then we will move on to Laura Steinbrick.
Hi, oh, do you need to swear me in?
Yeah, you need to be sworn in, Mr. McConville.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. My name is Laura Steinbrink, and I live at 2428 Loyola Road. I moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago, but I used to live on Silsby, the first block west of Warrensville, about 20 years ago. And I am from Shaker Heights, so I'm just across the Fairmount Circle side of Shaker Heights. So I'm familiar with this neighborhood and have for the 50 years that I've been alive. I'm very concerned about this because I moved to this community to be in a residential neighborhood. And it's very clear that University Heights was intentionally zoned to allow commercial development on the streets where commercial development makes sense. And Loyola, Lalemont, Miramar, or any of the primary residential streets is not that. And I would strongly encourage the Board of Zoning to remember the history of this community, why the law exists the way it exists. And I fundamentally second everything Chris Cooney said. He laid out a very clear, understandable reason for why making this choice would be detrimental to the community. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Steinberg. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any direct or cross-examination from Ms. Steinberg?
One question. What about Mr. Grant's proposed use is commercial?
I believe that the proposed use of anything other than residential is fundamentally against the philosophy of the community and the zoning requirements, and I'm against it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We will now go to Rodney Diggs. You would unmute yourself and then be sworn in by Mr.
Mr. Diggs, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Very good. State your name.
My name is Rodney Diggs. I live at 2295 Miramar Boulevard. And I know we've had lots of really great points, but I wanted to hopefully point out a couple of things that I think need to be either said or reiterated. The one thing, first of all, is that this special use permit, if granted, is setting a bad precedent. I can't imagine if this goes through, what other things come in the future, right? That's the first point. The second point is, I know that the intent, Danny's intent, is sort of not as grand, not no pun intended, but it's not as he's not talking about something large right now, but the special use permit allows him to expand into just that. And that decision is basically up to him once it's granted. And we can't do anything about it. Lastly, talking about the benefits, we have 29 of the 39 residents on this street signing a petition hoping that this group will deny that request. And I have not heard of any points that would make me agree that this special use permit is going to benefit the rest of the neighborhood. This sounds like basically Danny's inconvenienced by walking to synagogue. And now we have to sort of make changes to the rules because he wants a little bit more convenience. I don't see how this is benefiting the rest of their neighborhood. And those are the points I needed to make.
Okay, very good. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Mr. Diggs?
One question. In what way do you imagine Mr. Grant's proposed use would directly affect you on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, Mr. Diggs.
As if he does not want to answer, we cannot compel him to.
Wait. I am answering.
Okay.
Oh, I'm saying if I were to look at me and I knew that there was like a special use, a house in the middle of the street, I might think twice about buying on that street. So that's kind of how I'm looking at things.
Okay, very good. There's somebody logged in as iPad 3. Your hand's been up for a while. You would be up next. If you could unmute yourself and then state your name and address for the record, Mr. McConville will swear you in.
Okay, am I on?
Yes. You are on. We can hear you.
Okay.
What is your name and address?
Oh, I'm Kathy Steiner, 4158 Carroll Boulevard.
Okay. Mr. McConville, will you swear in?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Steiner, you may proceed.
Well, I'll be your shortest comment for the evening. After listening to everybody, I just totally agree that that should not be in a residential area anywhere. I don't care what city it is. And that's it. I just wanted to voice my opinion.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, anything for this witness?
One question. Why do you feel that way?
Because it's a neighborhood city, and I don't believe that any church or any building or business should be built on a residential street.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Gene Cunningham, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. This is Jack Klosnick, and my wife is Jean Cunningham.
Okay,
we live at.
Okay, very good. Mr. McConville will swear you in, Jack.
Thank you.
Jack, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I'm sorry, I'll bring the camera on if I can. Here we go.
Very good.
Mr. McConville,
address for the record, please.
I shouldn't be.
Your full name and address for the record first.
Sure,
please.
it's Jack Klosnick, 2308 Loyola, 2308 Loyola, and my wife is Jean Cunningham.
Okay,
We've
very-
lived here for over 30 years. So, Mr. McConville, if my notes are correct, I thought you said one of the factors that need to be considered is whether denial of the special use permit or variance, or whatever we're calling it, whether it would cause an undue hardship to the applicant, Mr. Grant. And if that is correct, am I correct on that point? Now you're muted.
You're muted, Luke.
You are correct, and I can help you out there briefly. It's 1274-02F5 that you're referring to. That section says, no variance from any of the requirements of prohibitions under Chapter 1274 may be granted without the approval of the Planning Commission and the approval of council, each following public hearings at which the applicant demonstrates a clear benefit to the community and that denial will result in an unnecessary hardship to the applicant.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, I think that it's significant that we heard Mr. Grant say that he bought the house over 2 years ago. He remodeled it to put a music room in, and he had a spontaneous, inspirational idea, perhaps when he had a conversation with the rabbi, to convert it to a prayer meeting area. And I have also heard the rabbi say that it's not an ideal setup for even what they're proposing, and they're even considering a better location that would be larger if the interest is sufficient. That tells me that there is no undue hardship by denying this special use permit for some inspirational spur of the moment idea, particularly when you balance that against the questions that have been raised by the residents as to what it will do to the neighborhood as it has existed for at least 30 years or maybe longer, where we live in a city that is a delicate balance of a mixture of nice neighborhoods that are well maintained by solid families with family values, balanced against commercial areas along the perimeter that are designed to be commercial areas, and balanced against university property with student housing that we're constantly trying to keep in balance with a family neighborhood lifestyle. So with all these questions in mind, the balance, in my opinion, weighs clearly in favor of denying the special use permit and leaving the street as it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, any cross-examination for Mr. Klusnick?
No.
Okay, very good. Then I see more hands up. I'm concerned about time. If you do want to speak and it's not duplicative, please keep it very brief. Natalie Suppler, you would be next. Mr. McConville, will you swear in?
You swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Did we lose her? Not hearing anything. All right, we'll move on. If you raise your hand again, we will come back to you. James Murphy. Oh, sorry, I think I just muted you when you unmuted. Mr. Murphy, unmute again, please.
Mr. Murphy, do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do affirm.
Okay, you may proceed. Well, state your name and address for the record, please.
James Murphy, 2408 Loyola Road, University Heights. I've lived in this house for the better part of 13 years. My wife Meg grew up on Lalamont Road, as did with her mother, and they were residents there for well over 30 years. I'll be short and brief. In the interest of time, I want to reiterate what many people have said, that that this is clearly a bad precedent going forward for our town. I find that the only two people that have come forward to speak on behalf of Mr. Brennan have one of which included the fact that the only single reason that they're doing this is that they want to avoid a walk to their existing temple. And I'm sorry, if that's your problem and you used to live in this town, as was pointed out by another lady, you should have picked somewhere else. If your only problem is that you needed about a walk, you should have bought a house closer to where your house of worship is. There is far too much hearsay in this application. You're opening up a huge can of worms. You're setting a bad precedent. There are constant words and phrases like indicated and, and I just find that having watched this property being built for the last 2 or 3 years and the extent of the footprint and the design and the fencing and so on, I don't think it's appropriate. And I think the wool's being pulled over our heads. I very much enjoy the diverse community that we live in. I have commented over the last several months, if not years, about the great new traffic of young families and children and activities. And I love seeing kids outside playing, but this is not a place or a location to start a business and allow this can of worms to be opened up. And I appreciate you letting me speak.
You're welcome. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination?
I do not.
Very good. We will move on then. We'll try Natalie Suppler again. Ms. Suppler?
Hello, sorry. This is Ryan Supler.
Supler, excuse me.
Mr. Supler, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I live at 2304 Miramar. Thank you for your time and consideration. I can also speak to what the porters were talking about, that I have witnessed firsthand the noise emanating from Mr. Grand's music room several times. I do have text messages to another resident on the street talking about so, and I would be happy to provide a copy of those to the commission upon request. They were in September 11th of 2020 and November 2nd of 2020 while walking my dog at night. I could hear him playing drums. I also find the GoDabbin.com issue a very big deal. I feel like that is broadcasting to a greater network of people that this is a thing that is already in motion, has been in motion for some time. So I'm very concerned upon that issue as well. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Supler. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination for Mr. Supler?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to, it looks like Caitlin Moynihan.
Hi, yes, my name is Caitlin Monahan. I live at 2555 Eaton Road.
Okay, Mr. McConville, will you swear her in, please?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I moved to University Heights about 2.5 years ago, and I actually grew up in University Heights. I attended Jesus School, followed by Beaumont School, and loved just the community within University Heights. One of the reasons that I chose to purchase a home was it's marketed as the city of beautiful homes, city of beautiful and residential homes. So my question for Mr. Grand is, in the city of beautiful homes, why are you asking to create a business that really isn't going to have any true commercial business or commercial benefit for the city, and really just kind of change the city's theme overall?
Well, this isn't really a Q&A time. This is testimony time. So if you have commentary, that's fine. Do you have anything further you'd like to state?
The one thing that I would say is, especially going to Jesus School, looking at just some of the traffic, things like that, I think it would be a true disruption, not only to the neighborhood, but to Miramar Boulevard. But I think adding this additional business, it would take away from the neighborhood at its essence. That's the biggest thing and the biggest objection that I have personally. So just wanted to make that point there.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination from Ms. Monahan?
one question. How do you specifically imagine Mr. Grant's proposed use would undermine the nature of University Heights as a city of beautiful homes?
The city of beautiful homes, when I think of that, I think of families, individuals that are really cultivating these homes. Having a business and a flurry of cars around the streets, although I know Mr. Grant has mentioned that it's not his intention, it's really going to take away from that. I know a number of people have talked about people walking on the streets, especially amidst the COVID pandemic. Something I myself, I walk my dog every single day. It would be something that I think would absolutely change the neighborhood. I would avoid if there's going to be a number of cars, a number of people crossing the street. It's just an additional danger to not only our neighborhood, but the kids in our neighborhood, this neighborhood of residential homes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Kevin Callanan, you're next. If you're still interested.
Yeah, actually, it's Mary Ellen Callanan.
Mary Ellen Callanan. Mr. McConville, will you swear in, please?
Mary Ellen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
So my address is 2445 Loyola Road.
Okay, very good. You may proceed.
Okay, I thank you for the opportunity. I just want to say that I appreciate Mr. Grand's devotion to his faith and understand the harsh winters. But I agree with most others on the call. This opens up a can of worms and sets a bad precedence. This summer, I was driving in the neighborhood on Churchill Boulevard, and there was a tent set up with chairs, and there were probably 40, 50 men gathered on a Saturday. I believe that's the same. It was in the papers that they also were requesting this shul stipulation. In terms of creativity, there's a large office building that's next to Target. It's on Miramar and Cedar. Why not just see if you could rent some space and have your prayer group meet there? It would be a shorter walk and it wouldn't bother any of the neighbors. I do think, it says 10 people. Like I said, this house I observed this summer had 40 to 50. I think it would be a struggle for the city to enforce any of these stipulations. So I think it would just be best for all considered that this is not granted. And then hopefully Mr. Grand and his group could find another location.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rosenfeld, do you have any cross-examination here?
Same question as I've had before, but this time to you. Is there any specific aspect of Mr. Grand's proposed use as it exists that you think would directly affect your use of your own premises or otherwise impact the neighborhood?
I think some people have said, it's just increased foot traffic and cars. I mean, the city has a small staff. I've had other issues before where things are it's hard to get a response. I think, it's asking a lot. And it's one of those things, there's something on paper and then over time, more people want to join, or there's a tent outside, or people are talking. I just think that it's just going to other people can, submit to get something like this. We have lived here for 26 years. And part of the reason is, a city of beautiful homes, we can take walks. You might see a dog walker. You're not having, groups of people coming and going. If my next door neighbor had a group of 10 every Saturday, it would get to be bothersome. It's just the large group coming and going. So I think, talk about creativity, I think, Cedar and Miramar, that's like a block. Let's just come up with a solution that works for everyone.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take one more. MH Bigach, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. If you would.
That's me. My name's Margaret. I'm a nurse and
yes,
I've been a nurse.
I was going to swear you in.
Oh, sorry.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Margaret Bigach, 2328 Lamont Road.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I would reiterate everything that was said so far. I agree with so much. I agree that there's been a lot of inconsistencies in what Mr. Grant has said. First, he said there was going to be a handful of people, which means 5. then it's 21. And I guess my concern is I'm a nurse. I work in an emergency room with COVID right now. There would be 21 people in this room. They have one bathroom for all these people, and they show that COVID is spread through the bathroom. So that would be another concern. In my neighborhood, then there would be these people coming in. If he's had on the website of people coming in from elsewhere, we would have an issue with COVID. COVID is not going away. It's here for a while, and who knows what other disease we have in the future. There's going to be more things. I don't want to be, spread any kind of things or anything, but it is the future. I mean, we are going to have different kind of diseases and things, and 21 people in a small room, it would bring these kind of things into our community too. So that's my concern as a health professional. I reiterate everything else. I've seen a lot of inconsistencies in what Mr. Grant had said and what his counsel have said. And that's concerning to me because I don't think that, with everything that's gone on, I don't, to be honest, I don't trust a lot of people with what they say and what they do.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bigok. Mr. Rosenfeld, any cross here?
No.
Okay, thank you. I see Callanan, you've raised your hand again. Is there a point that you're raising to? I think you've already spoken. All right. Okay, well, then that was the last speaker. We will then move on to opportunity for rebuttal. Mr. Rosenfeld.
Oh, man. So I'm hearing, there's obviously a consistent concern I'm hearing, and I'm hoping that, a lot of the questions that I heard, a lot of the concerns I heard addressed, they were specifically accounted for while myself and while Danny Grand, Mr. Grand, and while Rabbi Rotsman were speaking. The one question I agree was not squarely addressed was capacity. How many people will actually be here to fulfill, to pray on a given day when the premises are open for prayer? Let's be completely clear. And I'm going to say things that Mr. Grant probably prefer I not say. We should have a realistic expectation, and that goes with all of our concerns. We should have a realistic expectation for what Mr. Grant's proposed use constitutes. In terms of capacity, sure, he has 21 chairs. In terms of realistic ability to fill those 21 chairs, it's not so great. If we put a probability on it, it's not so great. There are a lot of shuls in town where the actual Jewish community, the bulk of it, currently lives and resides. Those Jews already have a place where they worship on these days where Mr. Grant would be using his premises as a prayer room. The people he would be reaching here are people who happen to be, let's say, as far up as Belvoir. No one is really going to pass Belvoir, closer to Green Road. There will probably be no one walking towards services, at least on a routine basis. That's part of why Mr. Grant is doing that. There's also a lot of talk about him only wanting to do this because he doesn't want to do the walk. Mr. Grant would and does and will do the walk if need be. And sure, that's a benefit of what he's trying to do. But that's not the sole reason for why he's doing this. Although that's a reason he stated. The reason he's doing this is because he truly believes it's a mitzvah. It's a good thing to do for the community. He does have neighbors, and there are people on his side of Belvoir who would benefit from this. It may not be as legion as the people who are in opposition, but it's not a Jewish community, so that's no surprise. And it doesn't mean that this will just explode and there will be a huge influx of Jews living on the other side of Belvoir. That's a process. University Heights on the Green Road area is currently undergoing an expansion of the Jewish community. That's where shuls, we have the Beechwood Kollel. That's a full on Shul. That is a parking lot that required special use permit. That is people shuttling in, day out, morning, day, and night. That's not the situation here whatsoever. That's a place where people flock to. Here, it's a place where people will come to because it happens to have been convenient for them because they happen to live on another side of Belvoir. So that's a realistic expectation. I can tell you from talking to other people in my own community that people are not expecting this to just take off and run flying. We honestly think he would be lucky on a lot of Shabbos, on a lot of different holidays and Shabbases to even get to the minyan. It's a hard thing to start a shul, especially when there's not much of a population to pull from. And that's part of why, and this leads into the aspect of commercial and business, which was another often repeated concern. Mr. Grant is an extraordinarily charitable person. I can attest to that from the years I've known him. We should not assume that he's acting out of self-gain. I don't think that would be a fair estimate of him, and I don't think there's anything to base that on. He's not seeking religious tax exemption on his property. I don't even think he would qualify for it, though it's beside the point really here. It just is, Vivian. I know, but it is. And there's no money to be made. Let's say he were to put out a couple of tzedakah boxes, a couple of tzedakah bins, cans on the altar. That's quarters, maybe some dollar bills. And it's not even for him to keep, unless it's designated for him to keep. So we're not talking money here. We really are, and he's put in expenses for these items. There's no commercial business aspect of it.
I'm going to interrupt here. Mr. Szymborski, can we prevail upon you to remain on the call for some period of time?
Only if you tell me when this is going to end, Luke.
Well, we're gonna turn the floor over to the Planning Commission to ask questions. So you guys will be in.
I need this over by 10:15. This has gone on long enough. I'm sorry.
You guys are in control.
Let me just say there are 195 signed petitions against this, and we're sitting here and going through this. So I hope this ends by 10:15.
Okay, well, if we're done with the rebuttal, then we would be asking you and the other Planning Commission panelists if you have any questions to ask the applicant.
I don't have anything to ask the applicant. I am just going to say I have from Kelly and from Luke 195 signed petitions that I looked at and I read through, and I've been to 3 houses in University Heights, and 134 of those signers live in this city, and they're against this. And there are places where we have designated uses for these types of special uses. So if you want to know where I stand, it's not in favor of this. That's all I have to say.
Very good.
And I'm actually disappointed that this was brought to our attention, in that I would hope the applicant would know where the community stood with this. We are a loving community. We live amongst each other. We understand diversity here. And when we have 195 people coming out against this, this is a waste of my time this evening.
For Planning Commission members, if you have questions of the applicant, you can ask questions. Alternatively, if you wish to close the floor, you can close the floor and make a motion.
Luke, Mayor, I have a couple questions of, I guess, procedural questions more than anything else.
Very good. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the whole format that we're going through tonight is different than one we've ever used before, and I've been on the Planning Commission for a number of years, and I don't understand why the format is so dramatically different. When we dealt with the Danziger application, it didn't follow this format. It wasn't we weren't told that we were sitting in a quasi judicial format, and there was a prosecution and defense, and which itself creates a very hostile confrontational approach to an issue. So can you kind of clarify why this is set up like it is tonight, and what makes this procedurally different than how we've ever handled anything in the past?
Well, a couple things. In the Danziger hearing, we did swear people in by oath. We did not have anyone speaking against the application during that hearing. That hearing, the result of which was a tabling, did not have any particular person speaking against it. The reason that we are following the procedures that are outlined in 2506-03 of the revised code is that this is a zoning consideration. It's one of the quirks of our zoning code that the special use permit under this particular chapter of ordinances, 1274-01, is not decided by our Board of Zoning Appeals. It's instead decided by our Planning Commission. And this is the very same procedure we walk through in every single Board of Zoning Appeals hearing we hold. So it's a zoning decision that is conferred by a special section of the code to the Planning Commission. I agree with you that most Planning Commission meetings are not conducted in this format, but when we have a zoning issue at Planning Commission, we do attempt to adhere to the restrictions and the guidelines in 2506-03, and that's why we're doing this tonight.
So I have a few more questions. Another question is, it's not clear to me from the packet of information that was forwarded what exactly is being sought. Normally, when we have a meeting, there's a proposed resolution that sets forth details of what we're trying, what's being asked, and that's not here. And so I find it difficult to consider something. Can you explain what exactly are we? Do we have to formulate it ourselves? Well, what exactly are we being asked to vote on and make a decision on?
The applicant is seeking a special use permit under Chapter 1274 to operate in a residential home as a shul.
When we've granted special use permits in the past, they're not always so broadly worded, and we're often advised by you that we can consider very specific, detailed special use permits that aren't so broad, that have conditions, agreements attached to them. Is that an option here, or that's not an option here?
The Planning Commission, as I've said many times in the past, has broad discretion to condition approvals as they deem fit. So I leave that to the discretion of the Planning Commission. I do want to make sure that Planning Commission members are mindful of the legal standards that are set forth. In particular, there are factors under 1274-02 that we've enumerated, and the burden of proof that the applicant must meet is the clear and convincing standard, which, as you know, Mr. Fine, is a difficult standard. But you have discretion to condition approval if you so deem fit.
Also, in the past, when we've considered this type of special use permit, we have reports from the city engineer, from the police department, from the fire department. We have more specific plans on the part of the applicant as to exactly how the property is intending to be used. Is the reason that we don't have those things? I mean, when we tabled Danziger, it was because of this very issue, that what they presented was too informal for us to properly consider. There was no discussion about, the place hadn't been inspected. There were issues of concerns about granting a special use permit when you don't know what the safety issues are in terms of the building. Why is this?
You had an entire hour. Stop.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, I'm a commission member and you're a guest here.
That is out of order.
You're a citizen, but I'm on the commission and
this is our city too, buddy.
Hey, everyone, we're asking.
I'm trying to figure out what's to vote on and what's not to vote on. And I have questions that need to be clarified.
Mr. Fine is within his rights to ask these questions. If there are going to be outbursts, you're going to be removed from the meeting. So, Mr. McConville, do you want to address?
Can you repeat the question, Michael?
Yeah, I don't understand why we're being.
I remember you. The department heads are here this evening. Mr. Chuney is here. Chief Perko is here. Chief Rogers is here. Again, the floor is yours. If you would like to ask any of the department heads as to whether they have any particular concerns, you're free to do so. I would agree with you that there are defects in the application. There's no site plan. There's been no discussion about area variances. I certainly think that if planning commission members are so disposed to approve a special use permit, they would be I believe, obligated to seek those items first. And so you would be entertaining a tabling. However, the motions that emanate from the floor by planning commission members are within the purview of planning commission members. So it's up to you as a group to decide whether there's a motion and second for any particular motion you may make. As you know, you can make a motion to deny, a motion to approve with conditions, a motion to table. Those are your options.
I would then make a motion to table that the applicant come back with a more thorough presentation with a site plan, with a review from the fire department, inspection of the building, what needs to be done in order that whether it's even a realistic option from a building code point of view that it be made into that it can fulfill the use. And that if he's going to ask for a special use permit, that it should be what the applicant has articulated, what the applicant wants to do with the building is not reflected in terms of the broad general special use permit. And I think the applicant might get a much better relationship with his neighbors and a clear understanding if he came back with a more specific request as to what he wanted and what was more realistic in terms of what he could expect to be approved. So I would suggest tabling it. That's my motion.
Yeah, there's a motion table by Mr. Fine. Is there a second?
How many people are on the planning commission?
You are not one of them. So please.
Matter. How many people are on the planning commission?
5 of us on the planning commission. So of the 5 of us.
That want to table it. This is a waste of people's time. Let's get this.
I'm sorry, you're out of order. I've just muted you. And if you do that again, I'm going to remove you from the meeting. So is there a second to this motion?
I'm tempted to second. Partly, watching the clock, I feel like I need more time with the rest of the planning commission and with, other city officials to talk about this. There's, on one hand, I have immense respect for concerns of neighbors when it comes to an issue that comes before us. On the other hand, there was a noticeable difference from what I heard was the intended use and what I heard from residents about what their concerns were. So I feel like there's too much to discuss here to try to wrap it up in the next 4 minutes. And I'd be interested in hearing from other city departments and city officials.
Well, April, I understand what you're saying. I make a motion to dismiss this. As I said, 195 people signed against this. And if the applicant appreciated this community, he would understand that.
Well, as a point of order, and
Yeah.
and we're bound by.
Luke, I'm off this call in 3 minutes, so let's figure it out, okay? This is,
We have a motion. April, are you seconding or are you not seconding?
And April, did you second it? I'm not sure on that. I'm not going to second this motion, by the way. So if you can second it, but
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'm seconding it.
All right. Very good. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Okay, call the question.
Very good.
I'll just discuss one thing. As an architect, and in the last case that we've heard, I requested drawings of the building so that we had a clear understanding of the space in which they plan on using this as a shoal, the number of exits. These were important decisions, or important things for me to make a decision as to how many people could fit in that space properly and by code. So I would like to see, as Mr. Fine suggests, more drawings of the building and the site plan, so we have a clearer understanding of how the space is to be used. From my professional standpoint, that is what I'm requesting for the next meeting.
One point I would like to notate is
Hold on. I'm sorry. You are not on the planning commission, and I cannot. I'm sorry. We cannot have outbursts from the gallery. So we have a motion. We have a second. We had some discussion. Is there any further discussion before we take a vote on the motion to table? There's nothing further. Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll on the motion to table?
Mayor Brennan,
No.
Mrs. Urban,
Yes.
Mr. Szymborski,
no.
Mr. Fine,
Yes.
Mr. Rock.
Yes.
Okay, the yeses have it. The item is tabled till the next meeting of the Planning Commission. So
You people should have done your homework. Embarrassing.
Embarrassing.
is there a
time.
adjourn?
He's had months.
Ridiculous.
Gross, this is
Gross,
ridiculous.
gross.
Ridiculous.
Get elected. I hope you don't get
Waste of
reelected.
time.
People have said yes.
Ridiculous.
Waste of time.
Don't get reelected. I hope you don't. Disgust.
Is there a motion to adjourn? There's a motion by Mr. Fine to adjourn. Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan,
Yes,
Mrs. Urban,
I think she may still be muted.
Mr. Szymborski,
Yes, here we go. Mr. Szymborski? If you give us a thumbs
motion
up.
to adjourn.
Yeah, we were muted, Mayor.
I know.
Yes, adjourn.
Okay.
Mrs. Urban,
Let me see if I can find her. I've lost Mrs. Urban.
okay, Mr. Fine,
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Rock.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. Next regular meeting is the first Thursday of March, which I think, or I'm sorry, this isn't the first Thursday of March, so the first Thursday of April, whatever day that is. And we will be back then.
Mayor, I'm just looking at the calendar and I feel horrible for tabling. I'm actually not in town that Thursday. If I could request that it be on a second Thursday of April.
All right, we'll see what we can do. We will know.
I also think the first Thursday is that the first April 1st?
That's the first, yeah.
Yeah, that's during Passover. I think
we won't be holding a meeting during Passover. Okay, we will schedule another meeting forthwith.
Thank you.
We are adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Good night.